840 here. So I've often talked about how much I enjoy the center-left podcast, Decoding the Gurus. And today I thought I'd spend a little bit time decoding the Gurus, because I was listening to their latest episode with guest Robert Wright, and I think, hey, there are some important things that I want to analyze here. So what makes Decoding the Gurus so good is that they analyze the facts and the logic behind various secular gurus' contentions. But first of all, let's go to Donnie Pauling. We're back with Donnie, who is our guest on Friday. So, Donnie, we were just talking via email before the show. What is life like as a registered sex offender in California and as you travel throughout the country?
Well, when I was in California, right after getting out of prison, I thought that life was sucky, and then I moved to Arkansas for a short period of time, and realized that in California the sucky life there was actually pretty good in comparison. So what is it like? Actually pretty good, pretty horrible actually. Just about everywhere across the country. It's, sex offenders are a group of people who it's okay to hate and discriminate against and treat really poorly. And, I've had jobs that were given to me, people that really like the work that I'm doing, and then they find out about that, because eventually it'll come up, and then all of a sudden they want nothing to do with you and they let you go. And so basically, I believe that, if someone's going to be rehabilitated, they really need to be able to support themselves and have a decent job. But our country, the way that it is currently, still allows people to get away with letting that be a reason not to hire. Now, it might be, I don't know, maybe it was justified in some cases, but I do think that the government should give more incentives to employers to give people a chance who are on the registry, because not every case is the same. There's definitely going to be some where it's justified to keep that person isolated and away from everyone else, but there are other cases where the person who is on that registry might have done something that's even less serious than a person who's been in a DUI accident that killed someone. We don't put those people on a registry. You don't get on a website and look in your neighborhood and see that the lady 2 doors down, has a DUI conviction that might put your kids in jeopardy every time she rolls her car out of the driveway. But we put a big target on the back of every, sex offender in the entire country. And like I say, I think that in some cases that might be justified, but not to blanketly apply that to everyone on the registry. I don't think that that's okay. There are states.
People want to know what the crime was, and so the crime was sexual relations with a girl who was 16.
Right. Yeah, that was the reason that I was sent away. Well, I made the deal myself. I pled no contest pursuant to People v. West, because the People v. West is a designation that says that the charges to which I'm pleading aren't factually correct, but I'm taking the deal to end the case. And I did that mostly because I didn't want to go to court and fight it and make the person who had brought the accusations against me, make her have to go through the trial, a trial. She'd already been traumatized enough by everything that had happened up to then. Honestly, the legal proceedings and the involvement with law enforcement after she initially went to police was more traumatizing for everyone than anything else had ever been up to that case, up to that point.
So,
You know,
if you had to do everything over with this girl and her family, how would you have handled it differently in retrospect?
well, after everything that's happened, I would have just never never gotten to know anybody at all. But had I, had they been in my life, I definitely would have kept up better boundaries. Like I'd said before on the last show, I wasn't seeking out an age group. I just got to know this person and really cared a lot about her and chose not to consider her age, chose to ignore it. Um, and became inappropriate with her, not anywhere close to the extent that was written about. That's one of the things that I've known. I'll give an example. There's a person up in Redding, California, right now, who was just found guilty of having a inappropriate relationship with a student. He is he was an assistant wrestling coach, and the girl was 17, and that was the only person. But the way that the media writes it, even to this day, even after the conviction, it makes it sound like there were multiple victims. There's not. I've talked to the family of the one who, for whom he was convicted, and even the sister of the girl in question says, no, my sister was the only one that he had a relationship with. But they put it in the paper making it look like there's multiple, because that's just what the media does. It's a more sensational story. And sure, law enforcement is going to go and investigate to make sure that there's no more students that he's had a relationship with. But the way that law enforcement puts it out to the media and the way they write about it, they never let the public know that, hey, we didn't find any evidence of anybody else being involved. Just this one person. That's not a good story. The same thing happened with me when I'm, was incarcerated in the jail on pretrial. They sit there and they say, oh yeah, we're looking for, law enforcement's looking into 8 possible victims. Well, the reason they say that is because I gave them the list of 8 of her friends who had been over to my house. I was trying to be very open and show, hey, this is, I'm going to take responsibility for my actions, and I would prefer, if you guys, would give me the benefit of the doubt and go and ask first before you make accusations. But that's not what they did. They said, we're looking for 8 possible victims, and then, nothing ever comes of that. But they don't, reprint a story or a retraction that says, yeah, we talked to these people and nothing happened. They just leave that out there because it's sensationalism, and people like a good story.
Okay, let me jump in. Did you ever see the TV series Sopranos? The Sopranos.
I have, yeah.
Okay, do you remember the scene where Tony Soprano's wife is in therapy, and the therapist tells her, you need to leave your husband and have absolutely nothing to do with him, and she says, okay, so you're telling him that I need to put up better boundaries. Right, you just talked about putting up better boundaries. He said, right. No, I'm not talking about putting up better boundaries. I'm not going to charge you for this consultation. I'm telling you that you need to leave him. And so when you say put up better boundaries, I'm thinking a stronger and, to me, more sane response is to say that you should never be alone with attractive underage or teenage girls, that you should never put yourself in a situation where that happens, and you certainly shouldn't be living with any.
Right. So, so for me, I would agree with you. You're talking about in retrospect. So when you said that, what I'm thinking is, if I was in the same situation again, how should I have responded to it? So if I was in the same situation where she and her family were living with me, I should have put up better boundaries. But, like I said right before that, I said I would never want to know them to begin with. So it's we're kind of saying the same thing. I'm just saying that had I been in that space where, yes, they are living with me, and she is, saying she wants to marry me someday, and she's running around my house with very little or nothing on all the time. I should never have allowed myself to cross any lines. But see, the thing is that I spent, if I wasn't out traveling and speaking, I worked from home, and she was in a homeschool program where she did the majority of her education at home, and then would go into class just for math and English, 2 days a week. So I'm around her all the time. And it didn't start off where, all of a sudden I'm just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to, have this relationship with this 16-year-old. It was something that gradually happened. I'm talking to her all the time, and she's sharing everything on her mind with me, or we're around each other 24/7 when I'm not off speaking somewhere. And I became very attached to her. So yeah, I would, going back, if I was in that same situation where she lived in my house, I would, have asked her dad to move in, which was the original plan. But he never did. He never moved into the house with us. And I would have insisted that, hey, you need to be here once, because what had happened is the mother was originally in the house. She left. She went off and did her own thing and just left her two daughters at my house because they were, already enrolled in school, and one of them was right about to graduate, and then the one, the 16-year-old, she had a couple more years uh, to go before she finished all her educational goals, which included going to college and becoming a psychologist. And and when she left, their dad was supposed to move in, but he just never did. Um, so yeah,
Even if the dad was
obviously
there, you shouldn't be living with teenage girls. I mean, that even if the dad's there, the mother's there, the uncle's there, it just seems like for most heterosexual men, they should not be living with teenage girls who aren't their biological daughters, or at least stepchildren, perhaps.
right. Well, and that's why I say, ideally, the situation would be to never know them to begin with. So, when you asked what would I do different, I was just, in my mind saying, if I was in the exact situation again, if they were living with me. But yeah, ideally is to never, and I don't do that now. I don't go around and associate with anybody who has teenage daughters. I don't make any kind of relationships. That's not a restriction. The judge said at my sentencing that she wished she could impose that restriction on me, but the situation and the case facts don't allow her to do so. Well, I've done that on my own. I What the judge doesn't realize is that I do think about what people say, and I ponder it. And so when she said she wished she could give me that restriction, but the case facts don't allow her to impose it, I thought a lot about it, and I said, well, I'm going to impose it on myself. And so that's what I've done. You know, um, I have dated since being out. I've had two long-term relationships, and one of the people was older than me, and one of the women, and then the other one wasn't. She was younger than me, but nowhere near a teenager. So I just died. That's not something I put myself in that situation anymore, and I won't again.
Didn't you have anyone tell you that you were in a crazy situation?
Yeah, I did. Craig Gross from Triple X Church, he said, you probably should get yourself out of this situation. And I said, all right, I'm open to that. You going to help me do it? Where are they going to go? I said, you show me where they're going to go, and I'll send them there. And it was just a situation where it kind of ran out on him, and the dad wouldn't take him into their house, and there was nowhere else for them to go. But I had, he wasn't the only one that made comments. He's just the one that I talked to most about it, because I was traveling and speaking for them at the time. And I said, yeah, I'm perfectly willing to get them out of my house. I'm not just going to turn them out to the streets, though. So give me a solution.
But
And
I mean, that sounds like you wanted someone else to take care of this problem rather than you stepping up.
no, well, the way in my mind stepping up was me taking care of them. I was, how am I supposed to find them a place to go when their own mom and dad aren't stepping up for that? Sure. I mean, if I thought of a good solution, I mean, it's easy to sit here and talk about sending them somewhere else, but at the time there was nowhere that I could think of to send them.
But most people would not have gotten themselves into your situation. Most men in your position, whether the
Right.
pastors
Well,
or normal men, would not have gotten themselves into your position. So the point is not to beat down on Donnie. The point is to understand and extrapolate from your circumstances so that we can have more
mhm.
clarity for everyone who
Oh
watches the
yeah,
show.
I don't.
So it's not just
One of the
that
things.
that
Go ahead.
here I want to continue this point. So the point is to understand the situation, to learn from the situation, and to understand why,
Right.
if you're willing to go there, why you were so vulnerable as to get into this situation, because a normal man would not have allowed himself to get into this situation. Like a normal man understands it's a
Right.
bad idea to be living with teenage girls, and they wouldn't have
Right.
been depending upon someone else to solve the situation. They would not have allowed themselves to get into that situation. It's like I was walking down the street the other day, and there was an above average attractive young woman who was just passed out on the side of the road. I mean, off the road. She was passed out behind a Wendy's. And so she was a homeless woman, but she was still above average in looks. She was young. I mean, she placed herself in an incredibly vulnerable position. So I was curious, like, what happened that this attractive young woman, has ended up in this vulnerable position. So, one, I'm interested in how you ended up in such a stupid position. Forget, anything that you may have
Yeah,
done
yeah.
with the girl. Like, what was it about you that led you to be in such a ridiculous position? Because no
Well,
normal man
I had too
would.
much confidence in my own abilities. I
Yeah.
had so it started off where their grandmother, who also they weren't allowed to live with, um, had asked me to step into their lives. So that at the very beginning, they weren't in my house. Their grandmother asked, "Hey, these two are on a bad path. I think that you can speak into their lives and get them out of it." So, of course, that stroked my ego. Oh, of course I can. I could go and help them. So I go and I talk to them and I help them with their schoolwork and, took them a few places, and gave them rides to school every now and then. And I was seeing their grades improve and it felt good. So, they were living with their mother at the time, and she changed boyfriends quite often, um, literally every few weeks it seemed like. And I saw, they don't have all that much hope. Well, the mother and her boyfriend at the time, the very, that she had, they broke up, and she asked if she could move in. So I said yes. Now I should have said no there, but I was confident that this isn't going to be an issue. This isn't going to handle. So they move in, and they're all there. They're all three, the mom and the two daughters, for many many months before mom takes off, to a place 4 hours away and just leaves them there. So yeah, it was overconfidence in my, because at the time, like, if you remember, I was traveling and speaking, and people saw me as a leader in certain arenas, and I felt like I was. I thought that I could handle it, that I could make a difference in people's lives. And then when mom takes off and just leaves them there, I thought, oh yeah, I could still handle this. But um, as time went on, and I realized I couldn't, as I mentioned in the last show, I asked a couple of friends for help and accountability. One of them was the girl's own adopted father, and another one was a principal for a school in the city where I was living. And then Craig, with him, I was like, yeah, I'm perfectly willing to get out of this situation. What do you suggest? Because I don't know where to send them. And I definitely didn't want to get social services involved, because in my mind that would negatively impact them to be stuck into some sort of a group home or something.
Okay, let's jump in here. So my understanding of life is that when we have a problem in one area of life, we probably have had the problem many times before. And it's just that this particular situation is making the problem so dramatic that we can't ignore it. So I'm wondering, is Captain Save-A-Ho, is that, did that exhibit itself for you elsewhere in your life?
I've always been a person that thinks he could save others, yes. And it's not necessarily just women, but I think I've always been a person who feels like I could save everybody.
Yeah.
And and also these girls, you know, in reality, if you think about it, you know, I'm speaking. Well, why am I speaking? Because I'm a former porn producer who left the industry and became a Christian. Well, who was I working with in the industry? Well, women from the ages of 18 to as old as I could find them. But where was the money the most lucrative? Well, in the 18 to 24-year-old category. So 18 and you know, this girl being 16 and her sister being 17. The difference between those categories is not really all that much. And so I, for 10 years, had been working with 18 to 24-year-olds, you know, and then up. But my point is that, you know, people that are very similar in age had been people that I'd been working with for over 10 years already. And it seemed, you know, rather similar. But in this case, I was thinking, well, I'm hoping that I could keep these girls from ever ending up in adult films and turning their lives around. You know, I'm sitting there giving myself way too much to handle, you know, thinking I could. And also, you know, I told myself, well, you know, for all those years when I was an adult, you know, I was around women all the time that were similar in age, and you know, and I could keep it professional when I needed to then. So why should it not be the same now? And especially now that I have this position as a religious leader, and I just thought I could handle it, and I was wrong.
Yeah. Now, how had the Captain Save-A-Ho mentality demonstrated itself before you became a pastor, such as when you were a pornographer? I suspect there was still a part of you that wanted to go around and save these hoes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you ever saw my websites back then, the ones that I owned, but as diluted as this might sound now to some, you know, on my personal websites, I would give work to anyone who wanted to be involved. So even if they didn't fit the standard for the other clients I shot content for, you know, if they're too ugly, too fat, too this, too that, I would still give them work. Now, you know, after I got out of the industry, I thought, you know, I wasn't doing them any favors, but at the time I thought I did, you know. So,
and did you find yourself getting caught up in the girls', you know, disastrous lives? I mean, let's say you shot them a few times and then they started having problems. Did you find yourself getting caught up in that?
Yeah, yes, you know, certain ones, not a huge amount, but you know, I take on certain ones, and you know, one of them, the one that I told you about before, that ended up killing herself in a park in Northern California. She, for example, was one where her life was horrible, and I thought I could help her too. We created a website that was just of her. It was popular, but she also, you know, lived with us for a while. For a time, she even dated my brother, and she was one of those that I thought I could save back then. But I ended up making her life worse. You know, I had good intentions, but launching that website of her made her life much worse.
Now, what about before the porn industry? Did your Captain Save-A-Ho mentality come out? Perhaps were there other disastrous
not really
to
then,
save
because
people when you're before the porn industry?
Well,
you never tried to
you know,
save anyone?
I was in my mid-20s when I started shooting porn and was married at the time. So no, you know, up until then I'd gone to school, gone to college, gotten married, and My wife was my focus. I loved my wife very much. Um, so it was just us and, the beginnings of our family. So no, I hadn't really been the type. Well, I still probably had that as part of my personality, but there was just never really a time when it came out before because I was married.
Yeah,
It,
but I mean, did you try to help some homeless dude? I mean, were
I
you trying
always
to help?
gave money to homeless people.
Right, but
I always,
did you get into any disastrous
no, because
interactions?
no, my wife was my sole focus, and she definitely curtailed anything, from it was not even a thought in my mind. I already knew my wife is like not going to go for us helping anybody like that, giving here and there, but she wanted to focus on starting our family. So yeah, it started after I was an adult.
What about in high school? Did you try to save girls in high school?
I didn't. No, back then I was just a nerdy dude getting good grades and studying a lot and remaining a virgin until marriage was the idea. Didn't quite make it, but it was the idea. Um, and trying to be the person that my parents had told me I was supposed to be, in the religious faith I was brought up in.
So in 2007, I met a girl at a Los Angeles Press Club event, and she was living on her sister's couch at the time, and so it was kind of intoxicating to take her in, essentially move her in with me, and give her a better life. And she was happy to just go along pretty much with anything I wanted to do, and I was intoxicated for the first 2 or 3 months at kind of rescuing this girl. And so when I was writing on the porn industry, there were times when I'd go pick up, porn people from the hospital to give them a ride home and stuff like that. And again, it was another intoxicating thing. Or there were porn girls that I knew who became suicidal, who would come to see me, and I didn't even try to have sex with them. I would just talk to them. And so I know the intoxicating element of rescuing people. It's absolutely a rush. It makes you feel big. It makes you feel heroic. Talk to me about the intoxicating rush of rescuing.
Well, that's definitely for sure. Like, these two teens, when they entered my life, I wanted to let them be spoiled in a way that they'd never experienced. I wanted to let them see that their life could be really good, and I was making a good income, and I spent $800 a month just on clothes for the two of them. I'd give them, and every single time I returned from a speaking engagement, see the money that was given to me for speaking was significant. But I also had a digital marketing business where I did digital marketing for car dealers. So I donated all of the speaking money to single mothers. But first, I would also give to these two teenagers. They knew that every time I returned, we're going to go shopping and get a full outfit of whatever you want. Whatever store they want to go to, and the jeans that they liked were, over $100 each, and they just knew every time Donnie goes out for a speaking engagement, when he comes back, he's going to use part of that money to take us shopping, and then I'm going to donate, the rest of it to other people that I was helping out. And I just felt like I was changing people's lives for sure. I think that we give ourselves more credit than for the change than is what actually happening in retrospect. But at the time, it feels like, oh yeah, this person's life's going to be completely different because I'm in it. So yeah, it is a rush because you feel like a hero. You feel like a savior of sorts.
And let's keep going even deeper. The reason it's such a rush is that it meets a need, a desperate need, and so. What's
a need to be needed.
It's the need to be needed, but beneath that, we go even deeper than that. is a need to feel that you are a person who is worthy of being loved. It's a way of
Oh,
repairing your
for
own
sure.
brokenness.
Yeah, yeah. And I've never, since my wife and I split up, really felt that I deserved to be loved. Because when I split up with her, due to my involvement in adults, and she, her life was ruined by it. Well, I can't say ruined because she's a strong person and she rose, but her life was definitely negatively impacted, and so is the life of my son. And so ever since then, to this day, don't really feel like I deserve to be loved. And you're exactly right in trying to help people during that time, because like we just said, my helping people and thinking I rescued them began when I was an adult. I was an adult dating someone for 6 years. We were engaged for 4 of those years. I could never walk the aisle with her because I didn't feel like I deserved it. And I felt like it'd be cheating on my son, to start a family with someone else. And that's when I started, choosing these pet causes. Even back then, they were, porn girls who had a rough life at first. And then after I got out of it, then it was these two, and so, yeah, you're right. It's all about that. It makes you feel like you're a better person. And then when what happened, all the stuff that happened with the 16-year-old happened, then all of that, all those feelings, you come crashing down, and you think, yeah, I'm a piece of shit, basically,
Yeah.
and because I'm trying to tell people I own what I did. I'm not trying to excuse it. So when I talk about, well, here's how I was thinking, I'm not trying to justify it. I can take myself outside of my own bubble and look at the situation from the perspective of other people. I'm just saying, no, this is what happened, and this is how I felt at the time, and I didn't feel like I was, some asshole who's, preying on a 16-year-old girl. I felt like I was a person who was saving her life, and I honestly, as I got closer and closer to her, and her sister's included in this too, but nothing inappropriate happened with her sister. But in these girls' lives, I felt like there was no one who could help them more. And when the 16-year-old kept saying she was going to marry me someday, and then her dad said he'd be proud to call me his son-in-law someday, I started thinking, yeah, I mean, who could possibly be better for her for the rest of her life than me? So and that's just honestly how I felt. Like, who would treat her better? Who would love her more? Who would try to give her the best life she could have? Um,
Okay, let me jump
and
in. So, if you didn't feel much of the time like a piece of crap, you never would have gotten into the porn industry in the first place. The biggest problem with feeling like a piece of crap is that you will primarily associate with other people who feel like a piece of crap, because someone who is normal and healthy is not going to hang around for very long with someone who feels like a piece of crap, because people pick this up. It's kind of a stench when one feels like, one is a piece of crap. People kind of get that signal, and then normal healthy people start to distance. Do you want to share
there
any
may be
thoughts on this?
that happens sometimes, but also there's a bit of narcissism in some cases where the people who feel like a piece of crap hide that behind this other person who's quite narcissistic and comes across as thinking that they're confident. So I mean, I was all of my life, from the time I was young, I excelled in academics. And when I was very young, my dad used to tell me that I was the smartest person he'd ever met. And I believed that to be true right up until I was speaking on a stage and sharing that story, after I was out of the adult industry and speaking at churches and universities. And in the middle of a speech, I realized I could not possibly have been the smartest person my dad had ever known when I'm only in third grade when he was telling me this. But see, all of my life I had believed that I was special, that I, was more intelligent than anybody else. And, the feeling like a piece of crap didn't really start until after I had left my wife. Well, she divorced me when I told her about my involvement in porn production. The reason that I let myself get involved in that was because I I saw it as a shortcut to becoming wealthy. Um, I always thought that with my intelligence that I felt I am going to someday be wealthy. So when porn came along, what had happened is I saw an article on MSNBC about the people who own the AT Kingdom, Kingdom Worldwide Web Operations Incorporated. They own AT Kingdom and several websites. And there was a write-up about them, how they were a couple just working from their very nice home and making millions of dollars. So I looked into their website, and I'd heard of it before because I'd seen images from their website in news groups. And back then it was easy to go to Network Solutions and find an email address for the website owner. So I emailed the owner, Kim Nielsen, and I asked him, where do you get your photos? And he says, from photographers all over the country and around the world. He goes, why? Do you want to submit? And I said, yeah, I absolutely do. So, especially after he told me what he paid, and he was spending $2 million a year on just photo content because video wasn't really all that popular at the time. There wasn't the bandwidth for it yet. And so I went, right to my wife, and I told her, man, we could really, make a lot of money shooting for these websites on the internet. And of course, she flipped out and said, absolutely not. But I did it behind her back. And, I started a fake company, and she thought I was doing technology consulting, but I was producing for Kim Nielsen and ATK. And from there, I went to a company called EE&T, who had Corrupts Hometown Amateurs, Corrupts Private Collection. And from there, when people found out that I could produce for those two, then other places started purchasing from me. And so I didn't get into adult because I felt like a piece of shit at the time. I began feeling like getting into adults. I got into adult because I saw it as a way to get rich a lot faster than my present plan.
Yeah, but people don't stay in adult who are normal. I mean, the type of women who get into the porn industry, they're broken. There was one.
Well,
let me finish my point.
Sure.
There was one outstanding characteristic of everybody I knew in the porn industry, whether they were behind the scenes or in front of the camera. That is, they all had limited ties with other people. Like, if you have strong family ties, there's no way that you can humiliate your family by participating in the pornography industry. And if you have strong ties to an ethnic community, to a church or to a synagogue, to a profession, to any kind of community, there's no way that you can humiliate your community by participating in the pornography industry. And so what type of people, let me finish my point. What type of people have weak ties with other people? People who feel like crap. So I still contend that someone who's got normal ability to bond with other people is not going to want to bring that degree of humiliation on others. And so there has to be more than one screw loose to do what you did. And I'm not blaming you.
So
it's just I think it's just a fact.
Say that. So I can see why you'd say that, but I'll tell you why I think you're absolutely wrong. You are insulated to the adult industry in the San Fernando Valley. Well, it was different up in Chico, California. And I've had this discussion before. That's why, and I've thought about it quite a bit. That's why I think that you're wrong. But also, you have confirmation bias because you live in a place where people come there for the specific reasons of getting involved in adults. I was doing things differently in Chico. I was recruiting girls who came to Chico State to go to school, and they came from decent families. Oftentimes, as I mentioned before, some of them were virgins. So they would come to my house, and after my wife and I divorced, I started dating somebody. We had a nice house. We would interview them, and they would see this as a way of making money a lot faster and a lot more than going to work at like Starbucks or a coffee shop. So it worked for us because they came to a house that was in a nice neighborhood around people who treated them well and acted like they were their friends. And they didn't think that their family back home, who they did care about and did not want to shame, would ever find out, because the internet was kind of new back then. And it's, you know, in LA, you guys heard a lot about it because you were the leaders of this adult online revolution, if you want to call it that. But up in Chico, California, where there's only 30,000, 40,000 people in population at the time, and parents are sending their kids to go to college, that wasn't the case. When I told people I was going to shoot them for ATK, they have no idea who the heck ATK is. You know, Kim Nielsen had 20,000 members of his websites, but that's 20,000 members worldwide. That's hardly anyone has heard of it. He's making plenty of money charging each member $30 a month, you know, for each of his multiple sites, you know, and he'd get people joining many different sites, so he was making millions of dollars. But people in Chico, California don't even know that ATK exists. So these girls are normal girls who have strong family ties and just don't think their family's going to find out. College is like that. People are rebellious, and I would tell them, isn't it true? Old religious men make up all of these rules that say that you can't do this, you know, because that I knew that was going to be one of the concerns of these girls. Their family often is going to have strong religious ties. So I would say, why can't you make money? Who's getting manipulated here? You're coming here to Chico State, fine. Go work at a coffee shop. Bring home a couple $100 every 2 weeks after taxes because you can only work limited hours. Or come here and work for me and I'll pay you $500 a day. And your family's probably never going to see it because it's in the member section of a website you've never heard of, and they probably haven't either. So yeah, in LA, yeah, I can see why you'd think that way, but Northern California, it wasn't like that. I didn't want those broken people. I wanted and that's why my content became popular with my clients. I wasn't a very good photographer at first. They had to send people from LA up to train me because I was trying to teach myself. And so that's what the appeal was, is the girls that I was sending to them were not broken. They became broken by the industry. That's one of the reasons I ended up having to leave, is because my conscience just bothered me so much that we were breaking these people who never been involved in an industry like this if they hadn't run into me. No, so yeah, I can understand what you'd say what saying, but I completely disagree because we're not in that bubble of
okay, let me jump in.
To become more broken.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you were dealing with normal girls with good family relationships, including a good relationship with their father. I just don't believe that any woman who has a good relationship with her father is going to want to participate in the sex industry. But you're telling me that many of the girls that you work with have had good relations with their fathers.
Yeah, they did. In fact, that's one of the things that I gave an example when I would speak. This one girl, I begged this content off the internet, being broken relation with dad. She was always a daddy's girl. He came out of his office one day, and someone in his car with photos of his daughter, from these websites that I'd sought her for, and he had no idea. And it humiliated him and broke his heart, and it damaged their relationship. Because I didn't start them off in hardcore. I didn't need to for ATK. That was all solo website, and it was photos only. But they would eventually get to the place where, and we kind of actually evolved together, myself and the models, because I started with ATK doing all solo stuff, photos only, and then as the bandwidth evolved and the industry evolved, people started having to do more to keep on making money. And so these girls they'd gotten used to making this money, so they'd start doing more too. And all of us would try to make each other feel better about what we were doing, but it would end up breaking people, including me. That's why I had mentioned before, that my first year at Internext, I'm sitting here seeing that I have never been exposed to, and I think it's disgusting. But by the end of my career, it's just so we be broken, myself included, involved.
Okay, let me talk about
beginning.
Hang on. Let me talk about the flip side of the desire to rescue. It always comes, I think, with the simultaneous desire to be rescued. So when you are rescuing girls, they're also rescuing you. And so I don't think people have the desire to rescue without the simultaneous desire to be rescued. Were you in touch, or were you aware of your desire to be rescued through rescuing others?
I wasn't aware of it, but in retrospect, I think you're exactly right, because my desire to be rescued began and more aware of really how badly I had screwed up by destroying my family to become involved in this business. My wife was a virgin when we got married. I didn't make it. I went on a time when we were broken. But this person found out I was a virgin. She decided that she was a great Christian girl who had lived her faith. I had a son with her at the time. Sorry, I'm parking. I'd mentioned to you that I was going to have to stop in a certain time, but I could still talk. But my co-driver is going to see a friend of his. So I'm going to have to let him know we're here, and I'll get out and stand on the side of the road. But these noise-canceling headphones should take care of the...
Hey, do you want to take 5 minutes, and I'll just come back to you in 5 minutes?
Just 1 second. Marcelo, estamos aquí. Yo voy a salir para... estoy en una conversación en el teléfono. Pero yo voy a salir y caminar.
So maybe we'll come back.
Yeah, I'm back now.
Oh, okay.
No, we can go.
Okay, great. So yeah, we're talking about the twin. The desire to rescue always comes with the desire to simultaneously be rescued by the rescuing of others.
Yeah, and that definitely happened. I didn't see it at the time. Don't need my glasses now since I'm not driving, which is great. Anyway, I'd felt so much guilt about what I'd done to my own family, like a total piece of shit. And so you think that you're right about that. I was wanting that desire to be rescued. I didn't know how to get myself back out of it. I was divorced, and I'd lost everything that had ever mattered to me, and I didn't see that ever being repaired, and it hasn't been. So I was right. But I really loved my wife, and when I started in adult, I just thought it was a way to get rich and have a good life together. And I also had a lot of hatred, and this was as far away from religion as you can get. So by the time that I really realized what a mistake I was making, it was too late. My marriage was already ruined, and I knew that my son was going to grow a family, and that was very difficult to deal with psychologically, that for my son. And I had to, own the fact that I'd done that. My dad, one of the things that did sink in from being a pastor's son was he taught me to accept personal responsibility. So I knew I'm the one that did this. Shy away from that. So yeah, that's when I started feeling like a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the Mike Pence rule? So Mike Pence famously won't have lunch or dinner with any woman who's not his wife unless she's accompanying him.
now that I was raised around that. My dad had the same rule, pastor. You know, so and to be honest, that actually has a whole lot to do with why I ended up letting those girls live in my house. That I was better than everyone else. That I could handle things and couldn't. But I can handle. I don't need to put those safeguards in place because I'm not like most people. You know, that's why I say there's some narcissism involved there. So, absolutely. How sound ice?
The
There's a lot of
sound,
traffic around here.
yeah, the sound keeps breaking up. Maybe you're further away from your Wi-Fi. We'll give it another couple of minutes and just see how the sound quality goes. But it hasn't been too good the last 10 minutes. But let me ask you about the universal human need for a hero system. Like everybody, secular, religious, Jew, Christian, Muslim, has a hero system whereby they get to have a special role in the cosmos. That everybody wants to believe that they're kind of at the center of the cosmos, and they have a hero system that kind of denotes what behavior is heroic and which is evil. And what you've been through various hero systems. You grew up a Pentecostal Christian, then you became an atheist and a pornographer, then you became an anti-porn activist and a Protestant preacher, and then finally you converted to Roman Catholicism about 5 years ago. So you've been through various hero systems. Do you have any reflections on the hero system, the human need for a hero system, and what it's like to change hero systems?
Well, as far as what it's like to change hero systems, the atheism for me was just a rebellion against what I'd been brought up around when I started believing that maybe it was a bunch of crap based upon all the rules and regulations. But changing from Protestant to Catholic, for instance, I didn't see that as being really a change. I just saw it as getting closer to what Christianity was intended to be. Because even the Catholic Catechism calls Protestants part of the church, of the Catholic Church, but imperfectly joined is how they see it. So from faith in Christianity to atheism and then back to Christianity. So going from Protestant to Catholic is just part of Christianity to me. But the hero system, I've never even thought of it in terms. I just, my belief begins by basically looking at this planet and saying, this didn't just happen. Somebody created it. And then the reason that Christianity makes the most to me is because of my relationship with my son, how I love him so much, and there's nothing he could do to change that. So I look around and I see this planet. Now, it had to have been created. That creator must love it. It just makes logical sense. What system makes the most sense? Well, in almost every system, you have to earn it. Well, that's not what a loving parent would do.
Wait, hang on. You're going to Christian apologetics, which is fine. I don't have any objection to that. But I want to just keep focused on the human need for a hero system. Like, we all need to feel... I know, but you're kind of going into Christian apologetics. So I just want to talk about the hero system, the human need for a hero system, the human need to feel special in the cosmos, that you're kind of at the center, and that you play a special role in the cosmos. So whether you're a secular, a Protestant, or a Catholic, you still felt that human need to believe that you play a special role in the cosmos. So see if you can address yourself to the human need to feel like you're playing a special role in the cosmos. And go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that still, it works along with what I was saying. In my mind, I'm like a member of a family who has parents who love every single child, and so it's not like I'm a hero. I'm just very important and loved by someone who matters, by the creator, basically. So I don't think of it in terms of heroism, other than when I'm trying to save people to make myself feel better about who I am as a person. But other than that, I see it as like I was saying, I kind of think, because of my relationship with my son, how I love him more than any inexplicable way. I feel like the creator loves me that, but I also think that the creator loves you that way. But I do think that any parent is going to do things about every single child. So sure, there are things about us that are more special than others, but not to the extent that it makes us better. It's just like every person in your life, there's certain things about them that are different for every other person in your life, and you really admire those things in them. I feel that way, when it comes. I don't feel like to be a hero who is only, more special than absolutely everyone else. I just need to feel like I have my own ways where I am special and I am loved for who I am.
And
So that's why I was saying.
Yeah, what would life be like if you came to the realization that you weren't special in the cosmos, that there was no group that was special in the cosmos? What would that feel like? What would life be like with that sort of thinking?
Well, to be accurate and to get at the point you're trying to make, I would have to feel like not loved. Like I don't have to feel more special. Every one of us is special in our own way, but to feel not loved is really at the root of my being. That's why when I feel like, earlier I told you I felt since divorcing my wife that I'm unworthy of love. So that's a driving force. So I don't have to feel like I'm more special than anybody else on the planet. But I do feel loved intensely. And if I didn't have that, what would be the point?
Yeah, so if nobody had any special role in the cosmos, would that be absolutely kind of soul crushing?
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of actually what's happening to our world now. It's going so crazy because we have tried so hard, as a whole. This society has been trying so hard to eliminate religion, for example. And religion, one of the driving forces that tells people that they're special for some reason. And as people feel less special, then we start having these crazy things happen like you see on TikTok all the time where, I even saw one the other day where a person is insisting that they're an animal and they're acting like an animal. I forget what pet it was, what particular animal it was, but that person is trying to convince others that, just like a non-binary person or a transsexual person, I am a whatever they call themselves, an animal. You think of me as human, but I see myself as an animal. It's like transsexual feels like they really are a male, or a transsexual woman feels like they're really a woman. So I think that's a result of people no longer believing that they're loved by the creator, of the universe. So I think that that's what happens is people start devolving and even in my own life, I'm not trying to say that, my case is somehow different. I think that even the stuff that's happened to me is as a result of not feeling deserving of a special love. So we just start falling apart.
Okay, Donnie, I'm going to leave it there for today. Do you have any final words for today?
Oh no, I'm just trying to get back to a place where I'm a decent human, you know, and that's what my goal is to always be decent and to never be evil. And since I've screwed up everything I've tried to help, I'm not really trying to help in the same ways as before. I mean, I still try to help. You know, the girl who was involved in my case, you know, I told you I support her 100% financially, but I don't give her any input as to how she should run her life. I don't give her any advice. I tell her, you know, I've realized through to try to help others that church tells me that I really don't have anything to give you that way. I could support you financially and tell you to pray and tell you to try to find your path in life. So, and that's kind of the road that I'm on right now. Is it's like I have to realize that I need to help me. You know, this guy standing in front of my mirror right here, he's in need of a lot of help. So focus on that.
Okay, Donnie, I'll talk to you another day. Thanks.
All right.
Bye. Okay, man. Take care. Okay, I want to go back to this episode of Decoding the Gurus here. Let me play. This is Robert Wright speaking to
That was
Chris
right
Kavanaugh.
when Bush was about to propose letting Ukraine into NATO. Burns says, you got to understand, it isn't just Putin. Everyone in the national security establishment in Russia considers Ukraine a complete red line. Okay? And he separately sent a memo, aside from that private email to Condi, who was Secretary of State then. He was at this point ambassador to Russia, okay, Bill Burns. This is before Michael McFaul. And he separately sent a memo about summarizing his conversations with Russian elites about admitting Ukraine to NATO. And the title of the memo was Niet means Niet. Okay, so many very smart observers from way back said this is a mistake. Burns even predicted this will lead them to screw around in eastern Ukraine. And there were lots of people doing that. So I don't think it's an outlandish perspective. But I guess my larger point is I think you should be able to talk about that without being accused of reciting Putin talking points. I was against NATO and the NATO expansion in the 90s. So you can't say I'm saying it because Putin says it. He wasn't in charge then.
Bob, actually, I watched an hour-long interview with William Burns yesterday talking about Putin because
Okay, let me set this up. So the reason that I enjoy the podcast Decoding the Gurus is that they frequently do a good job of analyzing the factual and logical bases that various gurus make their points on. So let's analyze the factual and logical bases of the two blokes who do Decoding the Gurus. This is Christopher Kavanaugh and Matt Brown. So they're a couple of psychologists and anthropologists.
I know that you've referenced him previously and the fact that he recognized Ukraine as a red line for Russia. And this actually, gray zone and stuff we can talk about, but a point that I would make here is I heard this interview on Hard Talk. I think this was before Crimea, where it was some Russian official, I think the foreign minister or something, and he was talking about Ukraine. And he was discussing ongoing events there and so on. And maybe it was after the Maidan revolution. But in any case, I listened to that interview, and I remember I hadn't paid that much attention before this event, the geopolitics there. And what struck me was essentially the Russian official is saying what William Burns describes and what you have discussed, like the view that, well, we regard Ukraine as a very important part of our sphere of influence. And, from the Russian perspective, the West is trying to take the strategic ally and pull them into their orbit. And they had a leader which was more pro-Russian, who was ousted, and they want to draw closer ties with the EU. And all through that conversation, the thing that struck me, and I think I'm more sensitive to it as somebody from Ireland, was this sense that what right do you have?
Okay, so this is good. So what's the basis for his argument here? The basis for his argument is his feeling, which is informed by his upbringing in Ireland.
To tell another country which way they orientate their foreign policy, what group or society they want to be closer to.
So his point is, what right does Russia have to tell any other country what they get to do? So let's see. Hey, Donnie Pauling, you're back.
Yeah, I happened to find a spot here that's got like full bars of reception. I don't know if at the end there you could hear too much.
Yeah, no, it's much better. So yeah, did you think of a point that you wanted to elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, I was just, I don't know if you got that there at the end where I was just saying that I think people break down, even like I have in my own life, when they don't feel loved, and valued and special in some sort of way. And that's really what I think happened even with me. That's the root of it. I mean, all of us have to experience it, and there's never an excuse for the actions that we take that are wrong, but there's always a cost.
So how are you meeting that need today?
Self-improvement, focusing more on myself. There's issues that happened before where I didn't feel like, I needed it, because I felt like I could handle everything. And, focusing on others tries to fill that void that you have inside. I have gone to extensive counseling. It was never something I had to do, never a requirement of me, but I knew I needed it. And so I've gone to, secular counseling. I had a psychiatrist for a few years and worked through a lot of things there, and had to be willing to own what I found and come to the realization that I'm a broken person, and the person I need to be trying to fix who is broken is me, instead of other people. I could still help other people in ways like I was mentioning, financially or something like that, but to actually try the psychological help, I always thought that I could fix people. No, I can't even fix me yet. So who knows if that'll ever happen. So I definitely can't fix someone else.
So how important was that psychotherapy?
Oh, it was incredibly helpful. And it's not like they're saying anything special that you don't know if you're not a person who's intelligent. It's just that if you find a good therapist, that you trust, you'll allow them to make you face stuff that you always, even if you might know, you associate that with what other people need rather than what you need. So I think a psychotherapist, when you form a level of trust with them, is a person that's going to do the most benefit if you allow them to speak into your life, and you'll take what they teach you, and you'll accept what you find, and you find someone that doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, even if they're making you address things that make you feel bad about yourself. You just have to realize that, even though they're only doing their job, they're trying to help you become a better person. So, and like, for example, you, Luke, on this conversation, the style that you have, where earlier you were saying, oh, I'm not trying to make you feel like a bad person. I know that, because I've been through a lot of counseling. So I take that. You're saying, hey, here's another perspective, because we all get locked in our own perspective. And we forget to look outside of it. We will judge others by a more strict level than we will ourselves, because we don't want to see ourselves in the way that others will. So I think that therapy is important in that aspect, is because if you get a good therapist and you reach a place where you can trust them, they're going to make you see yourself the way that you look at other people, and the way that other people look at you.
Okay, let me jump in. So let's get more specific about what does it mean to be broken. So try to share some examples from my own life, and then maybe you can get specific about what it means to be broken. So it's something that we hear a lot, people saying they're broken, but what does it mean specifically? So I understand the concept of brokenness. It means that your reactions to stimuli aren't appropriate, that your reactions to life aren't always adaptive. So, for example, if you tell me to, F off for some reason after I ask a question that you don't like, you tell me to F off and you hang up on the call, like if I'm still steaming about that 3 weeks later, that's obviously a maladaptive response. So if my wrist is working, that I can use my hand and I can maneuver with my wrist going up and down and side to side. So my wrist is adaptive. It's working as it should. If my emotions are adaptive, I'm not steaming about you telling me to F off 3 weeks later, because there's no reason that needs to be still bothering me 3 weeks later. Now, if I'm annoyed an hour later, 2 hours later, fine. If my girlfriend breaks up with me, if I'm still sad about that 3 weeks later, that still seems to be an adaptive response. But if I'm moping about a girlfriend breaking up with me 3 years later, obviously that's a maladaptive response. Just like if I can't move my hand up and down or side to side on my wrist, that means there's something maladaptive, something not working with my wrist. So there's something not working with my emotions if I'm still stewing about something that, say, a grade school teacher said to me. And so one thing that I got from therapy is that a lot of the people that I condemned, that I made fun of, I was actually jealous of them. So, for example, I came to therapy one day and I talked about going to an engagement party and how these two young women saw each other at the party and squealed and kind of ran into each other's arms. And I was mocking it. And my therapist said, "What, don't you wish that you could have seen someone at the party where you were so delighted that you squealed with joy and you ran into her arms?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I guess I do." So talk to me. What does it actually mean to be broken? And maybe, if you can, give me an example of what it means for Donnie to be broken.
Well, I think that part of what it means to be broken, I think that just like humans, that's a very that's a response that's going to be very detailed and very specific and unique by individual. But I think at the root of a lot of brokenness is self-centeredness, because like you were talking about. You said, that an hour from now, it's okay for you to still be mad if I tell you to F off, but 3 weeks from now, it's not. Whereas 3 weeks from now, it's still okay to be hurting from a breakup. Okay, what you're saying there is that throughout human experience, we've discovered these norms, what the norm is. The norm is a human's going to still hurt in several weeks from a romantic breakup. The norm is that a person is going to allow a conversation to bother them for a certain time period and then not more. But what happens with broken people is they think those norms don't apply to them. So, the person who is still right now smarting about something that a grade school teacher said to them way back then is so focused upon themselves that they think that the societal norms don't apply. It's okay for them to still be hurting, and they're making it very selfish. And that's what is at the root of brokenness is, a self-centeredness. You start focusing so much on yourself. For me, there's a lot of brokenness because I started focusing so much on myself after breaking up my family, and it was a focusing on myself that led to breaking up my family to begin with, but continuously thinking that there's some way I could make up for this wrong that I did and obsessing about that. That's a broken person. You're too focused on yourself. I want to make up for this stuff that I know caused pain in myself and others. I can't accept the fact that when this happens, there's a time of healing and then moving on. There's consequences for the actions, but no matter what I do from here on in life, it's not going to change what I've already done, and I have to accept it and move on rather than obsess about it and think, well, maybe if I do this next thing, that'll make me a better person and will make up for what I did in the past. So brokenness, I think, is very rooted in self-centeredness and selfishness.
Okay, so have you heard of the term doing a geographic?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, so if our, let's say our mutual friend Steve moves to Miami, and I tell you he's doing a geographic, would that, what would that mean to you, if anything?
I mean, if I'm going to guess, I'm just going to say he's getting away from everything and starting over in a different, location.
Right. He's trying to solve his problems by changing location.
Yeah.
So if I say Tom just moved to Denver, Donnie, he's doing a geographic. It's understand that Tom is trying to get away from his problems by moving to a new place. So I'm going to offer that to you, whether you were getting married, doing porn, being an activist against porn, becoming a Christian pastor, and becoming a Roman Catholic, and becoming a truck driver. I'm wondering, to what extent have you been doing a geographic? Simply shifting profession or religious affiliation to get away from a life that doesn't work for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly what's happening. The porn stuff, I was trying to escape a life where I didn't think that my wife and son and I are going to be able to afford all the things that in mind I believe we deserve to have. So I try to take a shortcut and earn money in that. And then, when I'm realizing that other people are being hurt and this isn't going to help matters any, I'm actually making the universe worse, then going to Christ as a Christian was how I was dealing with that. That's doing another geographic. It's like a reset. It's it's a do-over where you can, that of course the theology is that everything you've done wrong is paid for by Jesus, somebody else. You get a reset. And then speaking, there's double meaning and more than one reason for doing that. For one thing, it feels good to stand up in front of a bunch of people and be paid to talk about yourself. But for another, hey, now I'm this person. I'm going to live up to this moral standard. I get to start over. That's definitely doing a geographic as you described it. I wouldn't say that the conversion to Catholicism is that at all. I just saw that as a natural progression of a person who is trying to get to the roots of his faith and realizing that they started with this particular church long before Protestants ever came along. But yeah, the Christianity in general was definitely doing a geographic. As far as being the truck driver, that's not really the same. Well, maybe it is in a way. I do like the idea that I work all the time. I have 24 hours a week off. I'm separated from the entire public. I'm just out in a truck. I've got a driving partner, but he sleeps while I drive. I sleep while he drives. So you're pretty much solo. And I do feel like, okay, this guy, Donnie, he probably needs to be separated from the public right now and do some healing. And driving is a great way to do a lot of praying and thinking and listening to audiobooks and self-help books, which I do, every single day. So yeah, it's definitely along that same path. But I do feel, of course, I felt this way about every geographic, but I do feel like it's good and appropriate. I'm making a living. I like that, of course, but it's given me time to heal and reflect. And I don't even know what it's going to take to heal. I've been to a lot of counseling and been given a path to follow. I just have to trust it's going to work. But do I know it's going to work? I don't have the experience, so I can't say that I know it's going to work because I haven't been healed yet. So I can't tell you from experience this will heal me.
Right. So let's just for discussion's sake imagine a scenario whereby you go off the rails in the future, say a drunk driving offense or some offense that that everyone understands is wrong and blows up your life. Like if that sort of thing happened in the future and we were trying to understand why it happened, like what would be going on for you now that would leave you vulnerable to blowing up your life? Like, is it?
I mean,
go ahead.
I actually have just you know, it's funny that you mentioned the drunk driving thing because I did get you know, a policeman who thought that I was driving under the influence. Well, he didn't think I was driving under the influence. I was in a parking lot, stopped and sleeping in my pickup, and you know, he got a report that there was a guy in the parking lot sleeping in his pickup and he might be drunk. So you know, I'm fighting that even right now. I have an attorney. It's never happened before in my life, but yeah, so you know, I was in a parking lot, and you know, but the alcohol wasn't an escape at that time. It was just, you know, at the end of a long trip. Came back from Montana that particular day, driven all day, and I decided to go and have a couple of drinks and listen to some music. Yeah, you know, and alcohol makes you know, just kind of relaxes you quicker than, you know, the wind down it takes for under normal circumstances. Since that day, I haven't had a single drop. I'm like, man, look how close I am to losing absolutely everything yet again. I don't feel like it was something where I was trying to escape anything. I just think it was, you know, having a couple of beers and listening to music and trying to relax in a place where there's, you know, you can still be anonymous even if people are around. But if it happens again in the future, what am I going to do?
No, what are you gonna how are you going to reflect upon where you are right now that would leave you open to a blowing up your life episode? Like, what could possibly be missing, or what are you possibly not doing in your life right now that you really should be doing to minimize the chances of this type of self-destruction, if anything?
Well, you know, it's at this particular point, after all the counseling I've had, I'm sure, I'm confident that I won't fall apart. I'll be very disappointed, you know, if it results in a temporary, you know, derailment of the career I'm on, you know, the career path I'm on at the moment. But I don't think it will derail me in any way. I just think that, you know, through counseling, I've got the tools to handle things in a better way, you know, to be accountable to people in my life, which I have been, to, you know, there's going to be no arguments from me if things don't go my way, you know, in the legal proceedings that follow.
So you're saying that you're in a good place right now, that there's nothing that you should be doing that you're not doing.
Yeah,
to take care of yourself.
Right. I'm focusing on myself at the moment, and not because of a self-centeredness, but kind of the opposite. I think the self-centered part of me wants to not focus on himself, wants to focus on others, thinks he could help others.
Right.
But I'm realizing, no, this guy needs a lot of work, and that's the one that you actually can help.
Okay,
you know?
I got a friend who's got a intermittent problem with rage. So, for example, he was checking out of a grocery store and he couldn't get the self-checkout to work. And so he ends up screaming, you know, and just walking out because he finds it so frustrating to deal with the self-checkout. And these intermittent explosions of rage are not something that, you know, happens once a year. These things happen fairly regularly. So you probably had your own issues with anger. What do you think's going on for someone who's just out of control with incandescent levels of rage on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do have issues with anger, and a whole lot more since the prison experience. because you start feeling attacked by everybody in society, even if it's not the case. You take everything as a slight because you can't understand in your mind that no, not everybody on the planet knows your story and is responding to you because of what happened, with this teenager. So again, it's still self-centeredness. It's like you take everything personal, even if that, like your friend in his example, the machine is messing up. Probably, even if he's not conscious of it, he's saying, why is this machine picking on me? And he's making it personal again. So that's what I do, and I learned through counseling to help with the anger and the bitterness. Is it's like, the stuff is not about you. This is just life. We all have to deal with it, and where there's a world in existence, there's going to be issues and problems, and you're not the only one. This isn't a case where you're being picked on, which I think is at the root of most people who experience rage. They make everything about them and feel like they, once again, based on their life experience or whatever, are being picked on. But realizing that machine messing up is not a case where you're being picked on, or me. That stranger that gave you a look is not because they know your whole life story and hate you. People have a bad day. That person probably having a bad day. So it's once again having to get outside of yourself and realizing that it's not all about you.
Now, what about road rage? Do you experience road rage in your work?
No, I don't let myself do that because it's too dangerous when you're in a vehicle as big as I'm in. But I do definitely get some annoyances. I just won't let them evolve into road rage, and people cut in front of me. But once again, I got to, realize that that's not personal. That person in that car that just cut in front of me and slowed down, much faster than they should, they have no idea who's driving the truck. It's not personal. They're not trying to get at me. They're doing their own thing. So, yeah. I think that's what, again, it all comes down to being selfish. People take everything so personal. Someone cuts you off. You feel like, oh, I'm not going to let this person get one over on me. Well, that person's not trying to get one over on you. And that's what you got to realize. It's not personal. That person's not picking on you.
Okay, Donnie, I'm gonna move on. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to say?
No, I'll get back off here now for good. So
okay, man. Take care, bro.
All right, bye.
Okay, bye. Take care. All right, I want to go back to this Chris Kavanagh on Decoding the Gurus. Here we go.
To take the strategic ally and pull them into their orbit. And they had a leader which was more pro-Russian, who was ousted, and they want to draw closer ties with the EU. And all through that conversation, the thing that struck me, and I think I'm more sensitive to it as somebody from Ireland, was this sense that what right do you have to tell another country which way they orientate their foreign policy, what group or society they want to be closer to? So what?
Okay, so what right? All right, so there are no rights in this regard that are akin to the rights of being a citizen of the United States, operating as a citizen in the United States, right? Then you have certain rights. So if you're locked up, you can only be held for something like up to 48 hours before charges are brought against you. But there are no rights when it comes to what Russia can say about Ukraine. So Chris Kavanagh asks, what right? And the answer is there are no rights applicable here. Right. Rights only have meaning when there is a concrete state that extends them to its citizens, and then those rights are going to change over time. So during COVID, all these rights that people took for granted, such as gathering together to worship, going to work, right, going for a walk, right, going to a party, going to a bar, all these rights got taken away just like that. Public health officials and politicians said, you no longer have these rights. We're in a state of emergency. So rights, like everything else, are contingent. a contingent on a particular time, a particular space, a particular nation state, right? And there are no rights that govern what countries can say about other countries. So Chris Kavanagh is saying, by what right does Russia have to say to Ukraine, you can't choose your own foreign policy? And I would say, Chris there are no rights here. So what makes Decoding the Gurus so good, when they are good, is when they analyze the facts and the logical bases of what gurus are saying. Now, there is no factual basis for international rights. Who guarantees, who defends, who ensures international rights? Nobody. If you say the United Nations has no power, right? This whole human rights movement began in the 1970s by disaffected leftists who realized that all their political activism was going nowhere. And so they changed their political activism to moral activism so that they could feel better. Now, they weren't making any difference in the world because rights are only extended by nation states to their particular citizens at a particular time and place, and those rights change over time. Universal human rights have no objective meaning in any enforceable term. There is no power that guarantees, defends, and protects international human rights. International human rights are a crusade with almost zero relevance for how the real world works. They are an opportunity for people who participate in the international human rights movement to feel important and to feel special, but they make bupkis difference. They make zero difference in the real world. There are no international human rights. They are purely a wish list. They're a figment of people's imagination. So by what right, Chris Kavanagh asks, there are no rights that operate with regard to what nations can say about other nations. Now, there are certain rules for how great powers operate, and it's not a right. It's just a generalized tendency that we've seen throughout history, and we have no reason to believe it changes now, that great powers are very concerned with what their neighbors do, particularly with regard to foreign policy. And no, smaller nations don't get to assert any rights against great powers living next to them. Mexico, Cuba, Venezuela, Central American nations, Canada, don't get to choose their own foreign policy. Right? If you're in the Americas, the United States gives you the limits for what you get to choose with regard to your foreign policy. And if you don't abide by what the United States says, it will smash you. It will destroy you. And the same goes for Russia and its neighbors. That's how the world works. We're all locked in an iron cage together. And what rights do you have when you're locked in an iron cage with other people? You only have those rights that you and your group can defend, right? What's the best way to have rights when you're locked in an iron cage with other people is to make yourself and your group as powerful as possible to minimize any incentives for other people to bother you and to intrude upon your rights.
Russia thinks that they don't like Ukraine getting closer to the EU. Tough luck. You're not the rulers. You can put pressure on them.
Tough luck. Well, what are you going to do about it, Chris? Okay. This is the way great powers have always operated. What Russia is doing to Ukraine is no different from how great powers have operated throughout history. So you can say tough luck to reality, right? What Chris Kavanagh is saying right now is the equivalent of saying to the universe, I don't believe in the law of gravity. And so if anyone tries to assert to me that there's such a thing as a law of gravity, I say, boo, tough luck. I don't feel that gravity has any effect on me. Well, try to defy the law of gravity. Try to defy the laws of great power politics, and you will get smashed, just as Ukraine is getting smashed by Russia right now.
You can, withdraw economic support and stuff. What you can't do is send people into the country and just deny that you're doing it.
You can't do it. On what basis? Right? On what basis? Who enforces that you can't do it? Right? Chris Kavanagh says Russia can't invade Ukraine. Well, it did. Right? Chris Kavanaugh's got bad epistemics. Russia did invade Ukraine, so obviously it can. And obviously, great powers have done this throughout history. This is the way the world works. So Chris Kavanaugh is here shaking his fists at the laws of great power politics. He's the equivalent of a guy shaking his fist at the law of gravity.
Militarily annex parts of the country. And that's what they did, right? And the way that the person spoke about it.
You can't annex part of another country. Well, Russia did, right? It happens. And so who guarantees these rights that you're imagining, Chris Kavanaugh? Nobody.
Was like, Ukraine doesn't have the right to decide that they don't want to be within Russia's sphere.
Okay, so on what basis does Ukraine have a right to decide whether or not to be in Russia's sphere? There's no such right. Who accords such right? God? Are you saying God has given every nation state an inalienable right to choose its own foreign policy? Well, the world has never worked that way. Like, think about the nation state of Israel, right there in the Middle East. It was continually getting smashed by great powers. Egypt, the Babylonians, the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks and the Romans, the Arabs, the Turks, the British. All right. So throughout history, the small nation of Israel was continually getting smashed by more powerful nations. That's how the world works.
Of influence, or they want to be closer to NATO, or indeed seek NATO membership. And when it comes to NATO,
and Piggott says, if you put out a potted flower on your porch in Hebron, the UN will make you take it off. Well, how many divisions does the UN have in Hebron? Right. If some military officer or policeman comes and makes you take a potted plant off your porch, I don't think they're UN military or UN police. And if they are, they're only there because more powerful nations have agreed with it. It is serving the interests of more powerful nations to have people do this. The UN has no agency or autonomy to operate in Hebron beyond whatever greater powers decide to accord it, because it's in the greater powers' interest.
Membership. I'm always stuck with the feeling that it's talked about as if...
This is key, right? He's stuck with the feeling. Yes, right? Chris Kavanaugh is an anthropologist, right? He has no expertise in foreign policy. He knows nothing about how great powers work. So Chris Kavanaugh is a Northern Irish cognitive anthropologist who occasionally moonlights as a social psychologist. He has longstanding interest in the psychology of conspiracy theorists and pseudoscience. His academic research focuses on the cognitive science of religion and ritual psychology. He lives happily in Japan with his family. Always a little suspicious when people need to put in their own bio that that they're happy. But he obviously has no training in great power politics, in international relations, in political science. And the whole basis of what he's saying here is just strictly his feelings. That's it. If he had an argument to make, he'd make the argument. If he had case law to cite, he'd cite case law. If he had international law to cite, he'd cite international law. But all he can cite are his feelings.
If Ukraine was on the precipice of entering NATO, and that wasn't the case, right? Like, so what?
Ukraine was a de facto member of NATO, right? Sometimes there's very little difference between being a formal member of something and being a de facto member of something. So if you live with a woman for 15 years, she is de facto your wife, right? She may not be legally, according to law, your wife. She is de facto your wife. And if you divorce her, if you want to split up, she can go to court and go after your property every bit as much as a wife can.
Whatever way that Putin perceived, it wasn't that, in 6 months' time, Ukraine was about to be admitted to...
Ukraine was already a de facto member of NATO. It is right now a de facto member of NATO. How is Ukraine fighting off Russia so effectively? Because it is a de facto member of NATO. It trained with NATO. It is getting supplied by NATO and the United States. Right? This war is not Russia versus Ukraine. This war is Russia versus NATO. Right? That's how Ukraine's able to fight off Russia, because it's not just Ukraine. Ukraine is embodying NATO here.
NATO. But if they were, that is the right of countries to decide. It's the same way.
That is the right of countries to decide. Okay, who says? On what basis? Right? It has never worked this way in reality. Right? It's never worked this way in reality, that small nation states next to much more powerful nation states have an inalienable right to choose whatever foreign policy or alliances that they want to participate in. It's never operated this way. Great powers smash neighboring powers that oppose them.
That little, I forget which country it is, but like Australia was upset, right, because another country was starting to cozy up to China.
The Solomon Islands.
And potentially allowing China to build military bases. But again, Australia doesn't have the right then.
The right. Who gives these rights that he keeps talking about? It's always talking about the right, but bad epistemics, bro, right? Who accords the right? Who defends these rights? Who empowers these rights? Who regulates these rights? Right? There's nobody. We're all stuck in an iron cage together. We're stuck in an iron cage together, and you come over and you rip a candy bar out of my hand. You know, Chris Kavanagh could say, by what right did he rip that candy bar out of your hand? But if no one's enforcing the rules in the iron cage, and no one enforces the rules in international relations, unless it's in the self-interest of great powers to enforce whatever arbitrary rules they decide to enforce at the time. The United States doesn't follow international law when it goes against its self-interest. You can never expect any nation to enforce international law when it goes against its own survival, when it goes against its own best interests. The United States invaded Iraq in 2003 against international law. We do it all the time. We instigate coups. Okay, we wreck countries, we invade countries, we violate international law all the time. All great powers do this, right? Because the number one task for any nation state is survival. And so if you're faced with a choice between survival versus following international law, everybody's going to choose survival, just as if you're facing a choice between survival and obeying the law, you're going to choose survival.
To, you know, just unilaterally decide. They can put political pressure, and that's the bit to me, like with cognitive empathy.
And the chat says the only rights that are true are from God. Sure, so they're true in a spiritual sense, but there's not much empirical evidence that God's going to come down to this earth and enforce those rights.
Where is the cognitive empathy for Ukraine and for Finland and for these countries which are bordering Russia, which are menaced by Russia, and that are under?
You can have all the cognitive empathy in the world. It doesn't take much effort to understand why Finland and Sweden want to join NATO after Russia invades Ukraine, right? So just because you have cognitive empathy doesn't mean that you then say this is objectively good from the perspective of an American or an Israeli or whatever, right? Cognitive empathy does not mean you agree with other parties, right? Is it in America's best interest to have Finland and Sweden join NATO? I don't have a strong opinion, but I would tend to think no. I think the United States should get out of NATO. Not a strong opinion. I haven't deeply thought about this. I'm more in favor of the United States shifting out of NATO, paying much more attention to Northeast Asia.
Understandably, seeking out to, you know, they want to join NATO. Sweden and Finland or...
I want a lot of things that I'm never going to have. Right? When I walk down the street, I see things that I want and that I'm never going to have. When I go to a dinner party, I frequently see things that I want that I'm never going to have. Just because I want something doesn't mean that I'm entitled by Almighty God or natural law or the law of man to get it. Right? What you want is simply what you want. It doesn't have any greater command than that. Chris Kavanagh thinks that because he feels certain things, that therefore they're objectively, universally correct.
The recent countries that are joining, this is a predictable outcome when you invade countries neighboring. And if a NATO expansion is the geopolitical goal, you know, Putin's cognitive empathy is lacking because he's basically united Europe.
Okay, so Putin's cognitive empathy is lacking. Why? Right. You can have, it reminds me of Bismarck. This is the best illustration. Bismarck said he had a complete emotional sympathy for Polish nationalism, but if Polish nationalists did absolutely anything in action to pursue that, he would smash them, because a strong Poland next door to Germany was not in Germany's best interests. So you can have cognitive empathy and smash people. I've had cognitive empathy and smashed people.
In a way that it wasn't.
What I'm saying, I mean, a few things. I mean, first of all, you said NATO membership was far away. Well, what Putin was explicit in complaining about was the kind of de facto NATOization of Ukraine. We were sending more and more weapons in, NATO advisors, joint NATO-Ukrainian exercises. That was real, and he said very explicitly it bothered him. Leave that aside. The way the person you described it was talking about NATO doesn't, Ukraine doesn't have the right to decide to join NATO or the EU. I would never put it that way. I would say NATO and the EU have a right to decide who joins them. Of course, they're membership organizations. They're selective. And
rights have nothing to do with it. Right, let's get some real talk here from my friend and yours, Richard Spencer.
They're not reading the newspaper at all. And if they're watching anything, it might be, some kind of Fox News type thing. But they're basically getting their information from anonymous sources, 4chan, some Facebook group, some weirdo on Twitter or so on.
Because the alternative is CNN.
It's chaotic.
Like the alternative CNN and whatnot. And it's just
but they should be watching CNN. Like, again,
no.
They need to be.
Well, but I agree with you on the church point and whatnot, where it's like this idea of like something. I like to think of it as the idea of something that is a sort of grassroots organization, sort of like of people who are like kind of native to an area that sort of exist in village communities and whatnot. Like they should probably be hearing from a top-down structure that is built out of a bottom-up systems, right? Where it's like the church only exists because of the fact that everyone in the village attends it. The pastor probably does other things on other days other than Sunday, and it's just sort of it's built out of the things around it, right? So things like CNN have this huge issue of like you're appealing to all of the United States of America, and the people who are running this thing are like investors, et cetera. There's like a huge financial incentive. It's not purely symbiotic,
But you're just giving some rather kind of organic and naive version of what these things were. I mean, the dissemination of art and information and media, et cetera, it's always been centralized, and it's always been connected to a power structure. And I'm telling you, that is a necessary thing.
No, I'm not disagreeing. Like I'm very for centralization. I'm just saying it's like the way it exists currently is pretty zogged.
Okay. Let's try to avoid language like that just so I don't get banned. But
no, it's me. I'll get in.
Okay. Well, I know you can use other terms than that. I agree that I think we're in a point of instability for the simple reason that people can get information elsewhere, and that can be a great thing if you're a serious scholar. But I think it's actually a really bad thing for 98% of the population, and we shouldn't judge everyone in the same way. Like we're not all equal, and most people really do need to be told like this is up, this is down, this is right, and this is left. And
we need to be to the choir.
Yeah. And most people don't want decisions outside of like which variety of mayonnaise, and they shouldn't be tasked with such decisions.
Right. So 98% of the population should only get their information from authoritative sources. No, I don't agree with that. You want people getting their information from the best sources. So sometimes that's going to mean authoritative sources. So I've walked down the street and encountered people who read me every day at the time that I was blogging a lot. And for them, it was very well in their best interest for information and entertainment value to read me every day. So sometimes authoritative sources are the best sources, but this idea that 98% of people should only get their information from authoritative sources, right, that's a level of elitism that's a little too far for my taste.
So I think we need to recognize that. Now, I agree that I think the other reason why we're in an unstable world is because there is this legitimacy crisis of the mainstream media. And in many ways, that's kind of not their fault to some degree in the sense it's about technological change, but it is kind of their fault to a large degree that they've kind of blown and continue to blow their shot at being the authority. And so I do think we're kind of entering this uncharted territory of a lack of authority or legitimacy in these organs that really do have to keep, America together. I mean,
and some of that's good and some of that's bad, right? It's not like, high trust in social institutions is just an unalloyed good. And it's not like high distrust in our primary, social institutions is an unalloyed good, right? There's nuance here. Sometimes our institutions go off the rails, right? If our institutions are acting against our best interests, it is adaptive to distrust them. If our institutions are acting in our interests, then it is adaptive to be positively disposed towards them. So I'm not for the elite or for the populace. I'm not disestablishmentarian or anti-disestablishmentarian. All right. Everything is contingent. It depends on the time and the place. All right. The CDC did a horrible job with regard to COVID tests in February and March into April of 2020. On the other hand, they've done some good work. On the other hand, they pumped out vastly inflated numbers about the number of people who die from flu each year to try to encourage people to take the flu vaccine. Right? That was dishonest. And because it was dishonest, they reduced public trust in them. So people then became more suspicious when the CDC came out and said everyone should get COVID vaccines. And I'm a big supporter of COVID vaccines, and I'm generally a supporter of the conventional wisdom with regard to COVID.
Just for instance, Joe Biden. I mean, Joe
Brandon,
Biden is
President Brandon.
President Brandon, right? He was offering America like back to normalcy. Like, I'm just a normal guy. I'm not a shrill liberal. Like, I'm actually, I mean,
I love Brandon.
He's kind
I
of
absolutely love Brandon.
I voted for him, and I'll vote for him again.
Me
if
too.
He sticks around.
Dude,
But
absolutely. I love it. He eats ice cream.
Yeah, he eats ice cream and wears Ray-Bans. What more could you ask for? But what I'm saying is that he was offering a kind of normalcy, and the sense of like, I'm not Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to be a shrill Antifa feminist or something. I'm just some normal guy, and I'm old, and I'm like you. And even that didn't take. I mean, whenever I walk around town here, I mean, granted, I live in Montana, so it's a little bit different. Whenever I walk around town, it's great. It's beautiful. But whenever I walk around town, it is inevitable that I will see someone with a like "Let's Go Brandon" T-shirt.
Okay, so why do people have "Let's Go Brandon" T-shirts? Right, because someone who's not on the left, understandably, has this sense that almost all of society's major institutions are aligned against him. That the culture war has gone in only one direction as far as results over the past 60 years. And so when you're caught in a current, all right, and the current is sweeping you out to sea at 4 miles an hour, you have to swim faster than 4 miles an hour if you're going to directly fight the current to get back to land. And your average American today who's not on the left feels like the cultural current, the institutional current is flowing against him. And so he has to fight harder. What happens when people feel like they have to fight harder just to survive? What happens when people feel like they're metaphorically being swept out to sea? Right? They tend to become more intense and more extreme in their rhetoric. Right? So it's not like the Let's Go Brandon movement is primarily about reactions to Joe Biden. It's primarily about a sense that non-leftist Americans feel like they're being pulled out to sea, that almost all their institutions are aligned against them, that they have only been on the losing side of the culture wars. And this is a primitive, primordial, knee-jerk, kinesthetic reaction to that sense that you're drowning and being carried out to sea. And so you say, let's go, Brandon. Right? It doesn't really have much to do with Joe Biden.
And so, like, even Joe Biden is treated as like the devil himself. Like, you're going to say fuck you to the president of the United States. Like, there is a serious legitimacy crisis in the United States. And
well, why is there a serious legitimacy crisis in the United States? Because the left has won all the culture wars over the past 60 years. The left has taken over all our institutions. And so the media is dominated by the left. The academy is dominated by the left. The legal profession is dominated by the left. Social workers and psychology and therapy is all on the left. And so people feel like they're being swept out to sea.
in the Western world.
It's so great. I love it.
Well,
Coming back, baby, round two.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Okay, let's get back to some decoding the gurus, Chris Kavanaugh.
As for, of course, Putin doesn't have the right to do the various things he's done.
It's meaningless to talk about whether Putin has the right or doesn't have the right. Rights only have meaning to the extent that they are enforceable. And if anyone's going to enforce these rights against Putin, it's only because great powers opposing Putin decide to do so. There's no international force that's going to enforce international law against Putin unless the United States and NATO wants to get on board.
Crimea. I have been a total stickler for international law for decades, and I've complained when the U.S. violates it. And by the way, I think that complicates our position as sermonizer about violations of international law. Our troops in Syria right now violate international law. The invasion of Iraq violated international law. People complain that's whataboutism. I would say whataboutism is a critical part of any moral system. You're allowed to complain about when people don't practice what they preach, and I would also say the fact that we ourselves have been so hypocritical in international law reduces the value of now standing up and trying to reinforce the principle of that invasion is bad, although I certainly believe it is, because much of the world isn't going to take that seriously because they see this as just a proxy war. They see us as imperialistic, as Russia, and so on. But the question I would ask you, Chris, to get back to prediction, okay, right now we're in a war that's killed tens of thousands of people, has displaced millions, and
yes, annexation happens, as Elliot Blatt says. Wow, Elliot Blatt, you haven't called into the show in a month, bro. Like, I feel like we're losing touch. I mean, where has the magic gone? I mean, we had days of wine and roses, bro.
There is no end in sight. I taped a podcast with a guy today, and we agreed, man, the politics on both sides, Ukraine and Russia, suggest this is going to go on a long time. A lot of dead people. Destroy the country of Ukraine, possibly.
So how do these sorts of conflicts end? Right? They don't usually end because the United Nations steps in. They end because one side decisively wins. Right? The Middle East will come to peace when one side decisively wins. Until one side decisively wins, there's not going to be peace. Right? Because when winning is still in the balance, when you still feel like you have a chance to win, you are incentivized to fight. When you have no chance to win, you have no incentive to fight.
I would ask you, just as a thought experiment, if my deployment of cognitive empathy allowed me to predict with some confidence that inviting Ukraine to join NATO in 2008, this is a very simplified thought experiment. I'm not saying this will.
Elliot Blatt says self-checkout hurts us all. It deprives us of the opportunity to interact with frequently attractive women who, handle our groceries so deftly. And they often ask, "How are you?" And sometimes they even smile, and sometimes they even smell good, and they can give you strength and power and joy that you can take from the checkout experience into the rest of your life, and even relive at a time and a space that is appropriate.
Alone would have done it. Okay, I think our policy would have had to have been wiser for 25 years to avoid this, maybe. But just let's stipulate in the thought experiment: if you hadn't issued that invitation, you wouldn't have this horrible situation. Would you still say, no, you got to go ahead because Ukraine has some right to be invited to NATO or something? I mean, would you not say, you're right? Like, there's all these Ukrainians don't deserve to die and suffer like this. And for that matter, neither do the hapless Russian soldiers. What would be your call?
So I think there's an issue about, knowing at that point, because like the whole point of it is that you don't know that. So you can't.
Well, sure. It's a thought experiment. It's a thought experiment meant to clarify your
It's a thought experiment that Chris Kavanaugh would not participate in.
Position.
Yeah, but that's part of the issue for me is like if you go back in time and say that, you can undo World War II by doing this intervention, which is just like, don't offer some treaty at some place and it leads to World War II not happening. Should you not do that because of the cost of human lives? And like,
so he's making up the fantasy that if only Britain hadn't signed a treaty with Hitler, bringing peace in our time, therefore we would not have had World War II, which there's no evidence for that.
Obviously, the consequentialist calculation is, because in the grand scheme of things, what does an offer of a treaty make versus,
That treaty bought Britain time to rearm, right? It wasn't a ridiculous thing to do a treaty with Hitler at that time.
The tens of millions of people that died in World War II. But in the case,
tens of millions of people died in World War II because there was a vital clash of interests. Right? Germany has national security interests in dominating Europe, right? Because Germany has no naturally defensible borders, right? Germany is surrounded by other nation states that are frequently hostile to it. Germany also had the capacity to potentially win a quick war to take over Europe, right? So we had a vital clash of interests that led to the war.
Of like, so if the outcome was foreseeable and predictable, that this was likely the outcome, I think for me the issue there is, what's the causal agent that makes that likely? Who is the person that is doing the invasion? And to me, Ukraine is the one that has to tiptoe to avoid incurring the wrath of Russia. That is basically saying that if they don't play nice, then they'll get invaded.
And that's what happens, and has always happened in great power politics. So Chris Kavanaugh does not like reality. Chris Kavanaugh wants to imagine that there are rights, enforceable rights, that simply don't exist. It's bad epistemics, bro.
I feel like...
Right, this is the basis of his view on international relations. It's based on his feelings, right, which is not a particularly compelling argument.
For people in Ukraine as well, that isn't the kind of choice that they want to make. Basically, that they are not...
Oh my God, that's not a choice they want to make. Maybe other people don't want to go to work tomorrow, right? But if they're going to pay the bills and support their family, they have to go to work tomorrow, even though they don't want it. Here's how the world has always worked. The strong take what they want, and the weak endure what they must. That's how the world has always worked. Not guaranteed to work that way in the future, but if I was a betting man, I'd bet that the strong will continue to take what they want, and the weak will continue to endure what they must.
Allowed to make decisions, or that they get invaded and face a brutal war.
And Glib Medley says that Dr. Jonathan Paul now works at a supermarket checkout. The junior high school teaching didn't work out. There were classroom management issues. Yeah, having a PhD in journalism, or a PhD in social sciences, or a PhD in the humanities does not tend to work out with, strong academic jobs, right? It's not easy anymore to get hired as a professor in the humanities and the social sciences. And it's not so easy teaching kids, right? Not everyone is cut out to teach children. And so working at the supermarket checkout is an honorable job. And it doesn't have to be the last word in one's career. I mean, I remember I felt like I hit bottom in 2010, where I was driving an acquaintance around. He'd injured his foot, so he couldn't really drive himself around. So I drove him. It's like an hour's drive in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon coming back. And then I would have to also do errands for him while he was at work. So I just wanted to hang out at Starbucks and read books, but I got paid $100 a day, and I would run errands for him, which largely consisted of returning items to Target. So I'd have to go to Target and return like a $3 bottle of vitamins. I mean, when I was doing that, I felt like, wow, I have really hit bottom. And I think as far as my under-earning, that may well have been the bottom. Standing in line at Target, returning someone's vitamins and other, low value items for, like a $17 refund.
Because surely there will be other things in the future that they might want to do economically or politically that will, in the future. Guess
what? I don't know if Glib Medley is telling me the truth, but let's just say he is. I'm sure there are other things that Dr. Paul wants to do aside from teaching children and working at a checkout. But just because you want something, I assure you there are other things I want to do in the summer of 2010 aside from returning my friends' low-value items to Target. But I needed that $100 a day. That $100 a day at that time made a big difference. It kept my head above water. So what nations want when they're weak doesn't really matter much. Just like what individuals want when they're weak doesn't really matter much. I want a lot of things that I can't have. Boo hoo hoo.
Annoy Russia and would lead to the same outcome. So you're basically constraining their future progress along a set route, which is set by Russia. And
oh my God, Russia is constraining their progress. Do you know how many people have constrained my progress by firing me, by breaking up with me, by ejecting me, by banning me, by saying bad things about me, all right, by saying no to me, by saying stop to me, by saying don't to me? They obstructed my progress. There were so many women that I wanted to make progress with, and they said no. They obstructed my progress. I could have grown so much, but they obstructed my progress. It's a shanda.
like I'm basically saying that the geopolitics are always something that people have to negotiate and exist within, and they're all
Geopolitics is something that people just have to negotiate and exist within. Well, I mean, the girls who rejected me didn't feel like they needed to negotiate it. They just said no, and I got the message, and I left. If I talk to an attractive woman and I'm getting nothing back, that I see very quickly she's only going through the motion, she's only being polite, she's only humoring me, I bail from that conversation as quickly as possible because it just feels icky, right? She doesn't need to negotiate anything with me. She just needs to show that she has no interest in talking to me, right? So too with Russia and other great powers. They don't need to negotiate with weak nations that are on their borders.
always be compromises made just to those.
Not always. All these beautiful women that I've hit on and they said no to me, were they compromises that they need to make? Did they need to negotiate things with me? No. They just clearly displayed that zero interest in me. And if I chose to stick around, that just made me feel worse and worse and worse. And it just made me more and more loathsome in their eyes. And it made me more and more loathsome in the eyes of people who saw it or heard about it. They didn't need to compromise, right? They didn't need to negotiate. All they had to do was say no, right? When you have great power, you can just say no. If a boss wanted to fire me, he didn't need to compromise with me. He didn't need to negotiate with me. He could just say, this isn't working out, and fire me. Because he had the power and I didn't.
Realities. But I think that there has to be consideration towards the feelings of people in countries that...
There have to be considerations towards the feelings of people. How do you think my feelings are when the women I wanted turned me down? What about my feelings when my girlfriend broke up with me? What about my feelings when the woman I was dating said, no, stop, don't, quit that? Right? What about my feelings? Right? What about when they obstructed my progress? What about when they refused to negotiate with me? Right? My love life humiliations are of a similar philosophical orientation as the humiliations of weak powers dealing with powerful powers on their doorsteps.
Are less militarily powerful, that are less geopolitically powerful, and their desire for self-determination. And
I had desires. Did I ever tell you about my desires? I have had so many desires in my life, right? I've had desires that people like bow down when I enter a room. Like I've had desires that people love me, that people admire me, that people respect me, right? I have had an infinite number of desires. Those desires are not incumbent on anyone else, right? I have no legally enforceable rights that other people must negotiate or accommodate my desires. So too, weak powers have no substantive rights that great powers accommodate them and their desires.
Independence. And I feel that I genuinely do think it's part.
So what is the basis for all his critique here? All he can fall back on is, I feel like. I mean, come on, bro. That's really weak epistemics. It just comes back to, I feel like. Come on, man.
Part of being in Ireland that I'm very keenly.
So we're getting his psychosocial, biological background, the way he feels very keenly about this. But have I ever told you, I too have felt keen feelings. I've had very intense feelings. I've been filled with feelings. I've been overflowing with feelings. And they didn't encumber anybody else, right? Everyone else was able to just say F off, right? Just because I feel something keenly, right? That doesn't then force anyone else in any direction. Nobody else has to bow down to my feelings. There's no power in feeling things keenly as far as making demands on others.
Be aware when people treat your country like a geopolitical football, or that another
But you're aware
country
that
has
America has done that. I'm not saying this is or isn't relevant. You're aware that America has sponsored coups all over the world and denied the agency of countries all over the world in a much worse way than just saying we're not going to extend NATO membership to you. We invade, we support, we do it all the time. And that's
so the U.S. does.
And Otto Paul says, yesterday I worked at the Delhi register for 3 hours from 5 to 8. It was very slow. I had maybe 10 customers, of which half were store employees on break. I'll say that compared to teaching middle school, my current job is almost completely stress-free. How can you at least control what's playing on the store's radio or stereo? Put some Ford or KMG in the background. And then Otto says, no, I wasn't moving from department to department. I was just doing the checkout stand at the deli. So, hey, Duvid is here. I'll send Duvid an invite. But if they start moving you from department to department, it means they have an eye for you for promotion. You will have the magic keys soon. Okay, let's get Duvid onto the show.
And has done. Like, it has spheres of influence. It's got a very well documented history. And you can take Cuba, right? In that sense, they didn't tolerate that Cuba had the right to decide to ally itself with Russia. And, so I grant that, but I also think it is important, like when we're discussing NATO and interventions, military interventions and invasions and so on, it seems to me there's a qualitative difference in what Russia has done over the past 20 years versus what NATO has done over the past 20 years.
David,
and
how's it
NATO
going?
Hey, Baruch Hashem. Happy
Okay.
Tisha B'Av, or unhappy Tisha B'Av?
Yes. So why don't you tell people a little bit about Tisha B'Av?
Well, God forbid it's the main day of mourning for Judaism. 20 full, strict 25-hour fast day, but full fast day starting from last night through tonight at sundown. It commemorates a series of bad deeds, most notably the destruction of the Second Temple. But according to legend, many bad things over the years all happened on this day. And it goes back even to the Torah with the spies and giving a bad report about the land of Israel. But collectively from the Jewish calendar, this is the worst day of the year in terms of mourning, thinking about the disasters that have befallen the Jewish people. If we went to synagogue and said what they call the keynotes, or like the lamentations, poems over hundreds, thousands of years, all commemorating horrible things that have happened to us. So it's a time to reflect, a time to mourn, a time to be very serious. It's not like holiday you could still drive and use electricity. It's like Yom Kippur, in that you're not supposed to use any water, have sexual activity, or eat or drink or wear leather shoes.
So how is it going through the day without having any sexual activity?
Thank God it wasn't a problem.
Thank God. And what there's always a big difference between theory and practice. So what is your experience of Tisha B'Av? You talked about what you're supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to be feeling and what you're supposed to be thinking about, but what's been the reality of Tisha B'Av for you?
Well, if you're in a frum community, you'll see people sitting on the floor also, although till past noon today, you're no longer required to sit on the floor. You're not even supposed to learn Torah. It's very serious. God forbid, Israel's in a war situation, but it's very serious. Like I would say, from the modern Orthodox to the Haredi, basically everybody fasts. Like even modern Orthodox, I would say high 90% of adult males are fasting. It's extremely serious. But at the same time, like, you could work, and a lot of people just, go to synagogue, hear the book of Eicha, Lamentations, read, Jeremiah's Lamentations, and then go throughout, the rest of the day. And, so in, Israel or Brooklyn, people will gather together and say like Psalms or chant or read the keynotes, and it could be prolonged into a few hours.
Right. But you're not answering my question. You said absolutely nothing in response to my question. My question was, I acknowledge that there's a theory and law for how the day should be spent. I understand that there are admonitions for what we should be thinking and feeling. My question was, how is your experience of the day in reality as opposed to the theory? We all, we know what we're supposed to be thinking, feeling, and doing. But what about your personal experience? Do you simply just align 100% with the theory of what you're supposed to be thinking or feeling, or are you a human being who has an individual experience with this day?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly just the fast and the not showering or using any water. So religiously, you kind of have to prepare. So if you're in a religious community, like which I'm not, so for me, it's basically just the fast day. I have to, so I know it's Tisha B'Av because I'm fasting. But besides for that, there's not much of a connection, thinking about the destruction of Jerusalem. But, it's mostly just trying to get through the fast and the uncomfortability of having, not showered. And God forbid, a lot of times I'll get very tired. And, by the afternoon, I'll just, lay down and fall asleep till after the fast is over. So, there's the disconnect, but the fast is, it's a major fast, 24-hour fast, puts it to you pretty hard.
Now, is there a social meaning in the day for you? Is this an opportunity that you relish getting together with other Jews, or is there a personal meaning for you on this day, or is it just something that you do and the meaning is not there?
No, I mean, the meaning's there because I take my Judaism seriously. I think about Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, and even in like the Young Israel near my house, the rabbi will announce, like, do not say hello, do not have small talk. It's not supposed to be a happy day, and you're not supposed to like go to synagogue and say hi to your friends or talk about mundane matters. And people sit on the floor also. So in synagogue, it's pretty unique. People sitting on the floor, so it's not communal in a happy way. I didn't go to synagogue last night or today. I read the book of Eicha for myself. I don't know if you went to synagogue last night or today, or your rabbi even publicly announced, like, do not say goodnight to each other, do not greet each other, try to keep a decorum of mourning.
It varies. Different synagogues have different degrees of emphasis. So sometimes, rabbis have made those announcements, but I didn't personally go to synagogue last night or this morning, but I have in the past, and often in the morning that they'll just be reading keynotes for hours. I mean, the service can just go on for hours.
Yeah, they have a pretty cool thing at the Young Israel near my house that I've participated in the past, where very few people show up, only a handful, but where people will prepare an explanation and a history of the keynote. So most synagogues, they just pound through it and read it, and it's not very meaningful. maybe in Israel or Brooklyn, you'll it'll be chanted together and slowly. But someone would prepare various keynotes and give a quick explanation in history. And if you like Jewish history, God forbid, especially like if you're a morning buff, God forbid, you have the background of 1,000 years. Like, okay, this keynote was written when we were expelled from this country, and this horrible thing happened, and the history. So I don't know if you've studied the keynote. I haven't done it for years, but when I was in Israel, I studied pretty hard, and before I prepared for Tisha B'Av, and I read all the keynotes, and I looked at the history, and I participated a few years in the Young Israel, where experts got up and researched and said over the meaning. So if, God forbid, like the 109. So like most of those are mentioned in the keynotes today, and if you know the history, so it's the 109 expulsions, God forbid, with added poem of mourning.
Okay, let's get Elliot Blatt in here. Elliot Blatt, how's your Tisha B'Av going? Elliot Blatt, man, you're letting me down. I cut off David to come to you.
Sorry, muted, sorry. Blessings.
Blessings all around. How's your Tisha B'Av, Elliot?
Couldn't be better, bro. Just 10 out of 10. So listen, my phone's going to die pretty quickly. So I just want to get to the self-checkout thing real quick, and then I'll probably have to drop.
Yeah.
But there's extenuating circumstances here, like here I'm at the stores. I've been working really hard, like cleaning out my apartment and removing a bunch of junk. And so I've been making all of these trips up and down the stairs, and like dragging heavy boxes, putting them into the car, driving across town, unloading heavy boxes. It's a lot of stress I'd been under, And so when I get home, I fell asleep earlier than my normal hour, right? Yeah. So I had like this 2-hour unplanned nap, and then I woke up because I really wasn't, ready for a full night's sleep. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I was really agitated. And then so I was in a sort of, non-traditional state when I went to Safeway to sort of just do a few errands, try to burn off some of that energy, and maybe hopefully get back to sleep. But I was in there. Sorry, I'm unloading a car right now full of crap. So sorry about the heavy breathing. So anyway, there's all of these revelers in there, like the green hair, the pink hair. They just kind of look dysgenic. They're just like terrible looking people in this Safeway. And there's only one checkout aisle open. So I'm reduced to using the self-checkout, and it doesn't work. It's like beep, beep. I get 3 through, and then it just then this, these are all identical cans of cat food. There's really no reason why it should just not work, right? If one works, they all should work, right? And Luke, I am a erect column of eroticized rage, ready to explode. And I'm the only thing that keeps me from exploding is like a thin condom of self-restraint, And that one little thing, that one little extra bit of free to just push me over the edge. It broke the condom of self-restraint, and I flew into a rage,
I wish we had video.
It was like we're all on a knife edge, Luke, and it's but for the hand of God that the condom of civilization remains intact.
And how often does this sort of thing happen, where you just fly into an incandescent rage? Never, except occasionally, except if my little routine is disrupted and my sleep isn't perfect. If I'm out of my element, then we're at risk. Then we're all at risk, Luke. And why were you buying cat food?
Well, I have 2 cats, Luke. I have 2 pets.
Why do you have 2 cats?
Because I was at the park one day, and I grew up with having cats, and I figured, well, why the hell not? Why don't I have a couple of cats? And then it was an impulse adoption, but it wasn't like it wasn't the culmination of like a multi-year plan. It was a totally unplanned event, Luke. And it happened. So I adopted 2 cats. Little guys. They were adorable, Luke.
And are you concerned about getting monkeypox?
Well, if anyone's likely to get monkeypox, it would be me. Because, you know, I just finished my 3-month course of flotation treatments.
And it really helping you, I can tell.
Yeah, they are, bro. Actually, it's allowed me to relax a little bit, you know, and I've been able to get a lot of stuff done that I've been putting off. And I'm including right now, Luke, I'm at my storage facility, and I'm unloading all this junk that I've been trying to get rid of and at least getting it out of the apartment. So it feels like a win. I'm satisfied with small wins now, Luke.
Okay.
I can take incremental steps.
Duva, do you have any thoughts? Can you help Elliot out? He's got this rage problem.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go back to your Buddhist ways. You know, like you need some chanting or more spirituality. Rage, anger is essentially just a bad quality. You know, maybe there's occasionally righteous indignation or hating the enemies of God, but you know, you probably want to get to the bottom of that and uproot it from your personality. You don't want to you know, stop it as you feel it coming.
And how about you, Duva? Do you have moments of incandescent rage?
No, thank God. Like you know, occasionally things happen that don't go my way, but you know, I've been doing character refinement for decades now, and you know, my anger I usually spot quickly and try to stop. You might occasionally hear me yelling or online or things, but you know, generally my anger is hard to evoke and dissipated very quickly if it is evoked, God forbid.
Okay, Elliot, so how many months were you doing the flotation thing? Like 2 months?
3 months.
3
solid
months.
Yeah,
Okay,
91 sessions.
Wow, and this cost you, what, $2,000 total?
$1,500.
Okay.
$1,500.
Okay,
Yeah.
And upon reflection, is this money and time well spent?
I think it served a purpose. I think I would say yes. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it across the board to anybody, but for my particular set of afflictions, it did seem to scratch the itch, so to speak. But you know, I didn't have any sort of one-on-one meetings with God or anything like a lot of the YouTube videos kind of imply is possible. But I was able to like you know, break through some procrastination that has been afflicting me, and like I've solved a lot of problems at work, getting my apartment together, you know, a lot of things I think it was a catalyst for, but weren't necessarily directly attributable to, if that makes sense.
And how's your Captain Savaho desire to rescue people? What's going on with that?
Well, it's the reason I'm in the storage cube is because this friend of mine dumped a bunch of his shit at my apartment. And for the last month, well, the last 2 weeks, I've been dragging this shit down my apartment. So I live on the 3rd floor. So every box has to go down 3 flights of stairs, you know? So this is a non-trivial exercise. It would be one thing if it was at ground level, but, and then I have to put it all in the car. Then I have to drive like a half hour across town. Then I have to sign in. Then the guy has to open up this gate. And then I get to go in the storage facility. Then I empty the car into this truck, this hand truck. And then like, it's a lot of work, Luke. And I have been muttering to myself the entire time, like, never again, never again. This shall not stand.
And do you get a rush from rescuing people? Like, is there an addictive high?
No, I used to have that. Not anymore. I really put it at, okay, what's the difference between save a hoe and like doing a mitzvah?
The difference is enabling versus genuinely helping. So if you are incentivizing people to continue with bad behavior, then it's unhealthy. But if you're actually making a positive difference in someone's life without destroying your own in the process, then it's healthy.
Interesting. Well, I think I've learned this lesson finally, and I'm in Camp Tough Love now. You know, you make you make your bed, you got to sleep in it.
Yeah, watch out for the monkeypox. There's a lot of monkeypox in Camp Tough Love.
Luke, the glib attitude you take towards this critical health issue is really disturbing. You know, I love life. I hate monkeypox. You want to see us all afflicted with monkeypox. You should really reflect on your attitude.
Yeah, good point. David, you once lived in a storage locker. Tell me about that experience.
No, Godfrey, I didn't live in a storage locker. I, couch surfed or was in between apartments. I never lived in a storage locker. I don't even think you could fit in those in Manhattan. It was pretty small. But I had all my stuff in a storage locker and stayed in various places off and on. And you had to go there often just for, to put my clothes, sometimes even daily.
Okay. And have you had a history of like trying to rescue people and come to regret it?
No, I never really had like a savior complex where I thought I could save people. But yeah, I've tried to help people that didn't work out or been taken advantage of, had bad association, multiple times. But I probably, especially in New York, we've talked about that where it's very difficult to avoid bad association. I think me and Elliot on Week in Review were talking about that, where it's near impossible in the big city to avoid bad associations. Sometimes you get very aggressive schnorrers, people that just ask for favors, people that ask for things, people that even steal, but that you just see again and again, and you can't really do anything about them. Get rid of them.
And what's your history with Elliot Blatt?
Well, we met on your show. We probably didn't actually meet on your show, probably the Babs cast, and he comes on Week in Review every once in a while. I guess he's mutual friends with Jennifer, who we probably also met on the Babs cast. So that's about it. We've talked maybe even tens of hours over a few years.
And have you had any passionate disagreements?
Maybe at the beginning about God forbid, like laughing at Holocaust jokes or something like that, but not really that passionate. You may be more, not really, like some on other streams that he's got a different. I guess I'm more serious, or just the facts, not as much for antidotes, but not really disagreement, just different styles.
Do you find your brain slowing down when you talk to Elliot?
I mean, you could put it that way, but it's just a different style. I'm not really that interested in kind of like day-to-day anecdotes of. I'm more a person of ideas, and like anecdotes don't particularly interest me. I don't know if maybe it's accurate to say it kind of slows my mind down, but it makes me lose focus from ideas. I'm more a person of ideas.
And Elliot, what's your history with David? Do you recall any passionate disagreements? If Elliot's still there, if he can unmute, so maybe we've lost.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I heard I was signing out of the storage facility. Am I back?
Yeah. You're back out of the psychiatric institution. You signed out.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. David and I tangled once. I don't remember what it's about. It was not a big deal. I'm content to leave it to historians to sort out.
And what's the next thing, Elliot, that you're going to try? You've done the soaking in the tub. You know, you've done the cold water swimming. Like, what's next on your agenda?
So it's a good question, Luke. I've decided on to open up a little side hustle business.
Okay.
So I got my main job.
Yep.
And it's pretty well situated now. So I've been. Hold on. Let me plug in the.
Yep.
Let me plug in the phone. I might lose you.
That's okay.
On Fox News Sunday.
Talk while driving. I'm now driving. So hold on.
And a major win for abortion rights in Deep
Can
Red,
you hear me?
Kansas.
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm opening up a little side hustle, kind of like Duvid. Just like, here's what's going on. So I'll give you the whole context. I know it's an anecdote, and you know, Duvid doesn't like anecdotes, but I live in a world of anecdotes, Luke. That's who I am. I'm a story-based
anecdotal kind of guy. You're anecdotal, right?
Yeah, I'm not up for the big ideas, bro. They bore me, Luke. So, yeah. So in the process of cleaning out my apartment, I found a bunch of books that I don't need, you know? So I figured I would just take them down to the bookstore and, you know, sell them to the bookstores, maybe get a lunch or two out of it. So I'm expecting to get like $30, right?
Yeah.
And I end up getting $110.
Whoa.
Yeah. I'm like, whoa, that's a few lunches, you know? So it dawned on me that people still buy books, which was actually a revelation to me because, you know, I thought everything was, you know, ebooks and online. And, you know, I thought everybody's like me. This is the narcissistic assumption I make is that everyone's basically exactly like me. And so what they're into, I'm into. And
were the university press like textbooks? I mean, I sell books like books. Most books aren't that valuable, but you know, some of them are mostly university textbooks, unless you have like first editions or rare copies. But you know, if you have like Oxford Press, Cambridge Press, university old textbooks, even those a lot of times are worthless, but those could retain value.
Well, I don't think there were any textbooks among them. They were generally pretty good quality, but they were a lot of trade paper too. The whole key to the book industry is if the book is in reasonably good condition, there's a market for it for somebody. So, a lot of books. It was very strange. A lot of books I thought they would buy, they didn't buy. And a lot of books that I didn't think would sell, they did buy. So it was it just showed me the extent of my ignorance. So, but I was humble before it. I did some 12 steps, and you know, I just left it to God, and I was rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, most have trade-in value. They're not even. I mean, it's a rare big bookstore that buys books and gives you cash. Most of them will give you store credit.
Yeah, and I was surprised they handed me cash. It was really interesting. So I figured, well, maybe it's because I'm in a city, and you know, there's still kind of a thriving bookstore. It's not thriving, but it's not completely dead. The used bookstore. I used to work in a used bookstore, so I kind of know the game a little bit. But then I figured, well, you know, people, you know, people will just give away books, big boxes of books, and you can just walk across town and then turn them into a couple $100 bills. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. I'm sort of having this sort of sideline little bookstore dealing thing going on now. I'm gonna see if I can make something out of it. It's sort of an experiment for the time being.
Now, online.
What about selling them online
on the street? I mean, I knew in New York people used to set up tables and sell books on the street. Maybe you could do that where you are, or you just mean online like Duvid.
Well, the thing is, I actually like the fact that it's about driving around and being out and about rather than sitting at home in front of a computer. I really starting to feel cooped up, and I just sort of like the fact that there is sort of a face-to-face human engagement aspect to this. Yeah, I've looked at, there's ways of selling directly to Amazon, but that involves shipping to Amazon. And I don't know if the economics really work out because it's kind of expensive to ship things now. The cost of shipping has gone up. And so, but yeah, I mean, I'm exploring I'm sort of in the exploration research phase, but yeah, shipping online is definitely a thing I'm going to do, but I'm not going to be sitting there selling books one at a time and putting them into boxes and hoping that they get there and dealing. You know, I'm not going to get into that granular level of dealing, right? I like sort of the wholesale thing. Here's a big box of books, you give me the cash, and I don't waste a lot of time. So I'm thinking about it that way. It's a lifestyle business, as they say.
And David, you talked about people shouldn't get angry, but we're supposed to imitate God, and all through the Torah and the Tanakh, God is constantly getting very, very angry. So why shouldn't we emulate God's rage?
Well, I mentioned there's your anger. I mean, Parky Elvis, it says straight, kas kina v'taiva mavirin adam min oilam, anger, lust, and honor remove a person from the world. Generally, in the Musar Sporum, the books, character refinement, anger is looked at as uniquely bad that generally has no use. There is such a, emulating God, being angry at God's enemy, but the case where that would be necessary is quite rare, and to allow yourself to be an angry person, and even if God gets angry in the Bible, it doesn't mean that we should emulate the trait of anger.
Wait, why? I mean, God is constantly getting angry in the Bible, so why should we be different?
Well, because we're not God, and God doesn't command us to copy God in God's anger. There's commandments, and one of them isn't to get angry.
I mean, God gets so angry, he destroys the entire earth. I mean, he kills everybody on it. I mean, that's a really intense level of anger.
Yeah, I don't know if you're just joking or saying there's no commandment to copy God. God gives us commandments, and just because God acts in a certain way in certain circumstances, there's no commandment to copy God.
There's no commandment to copy God. So, really,
can you think of one? So like copy God. God gets angry, therefore we should get angry. I'm not sure where you're pulling that from.
Well, we're made in the image of God.
Well, I said that we have free will, that we have, but even there, it doesn't say, therefore we should try to act like God. We're humans. We serve God. We don't act like God. We're servants.
Okay, we're supposed to be followers of God, but we're not supposed to imitate God.
Yeah, we can learn lessons from God, but if there's no commandment to get angry, you can say like, "Oh, I'm going to get angry because God occasionally gets angry." I don't think that that's not Judaism.
Okay.
I mean, do you have some sort of feeling that you're supposed to? I mean, there's certain statements, but that you're supposed to just try to copy God. It's like, no, we got rules. We follow the rules.
Well, we're definitely meant to imitate God, but not obviously try to impersonate him and not try to copy him. But where
do you get this from? Imitate God from?
Well, the idea that we're made in God's image.
But what does that have to do with trying to imitate God?
Well, if we're made in God's image, then we reflect God. So how would we not be influenced by the person that we're made in his image by? I mean, this is my God. I will glorify him. I will glorify God. Just as God is gracious and merciful, so too I will be gracious and merciful. Just as God is slow to anger, so too I will be slow to anger. We're told you shall be holy as God is holy. Right? There are all these commandments and teachings that say that we should imitate God. So I don't see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're saying that we should have certain character. I don't think there's any straight commandment that we should imitate God. And if it's specific, like you mentioned, slow to anger, and the attributes, because the Torah mentions attributes, and God's essential attributes, like 13 attributes, is merciful and slow to anger, and anger is not one of God's essential attributes. And you're saying, like, no, I mean, God gives us specific laws and commandments to follow. There's no set commandment to, just try to imitate God. That that doesn't seem Judaic in practice. We don't imitate God. We follow the rules that God sets before us.
Well, we have in Devarim, we're supposed to imitate God in loving the stranger. We're supposed to imitate God in resting on the Sabbath. There are all sorts of ethical actions where we're supposed to imitate God. So Devarim chapter 13, after God you shall walk. How can man walk after God? This is from the Talmudic tractate of Sota 14a. Is God not a consuming fire? What is it meant that man ought to walk after God? Well, just as God clothes the naked, so you shall clothe the naked. Just as God visits the sick, so you shall visit the sick. Just as God comforts the mourner, so you shall comfort the mourner. Just as God buries the dead, so you too shall bury the dead. So imitatio Dei is a Christian doctrine, but it comes from very strong Judaic roots. Elliot, do you want to weigh in on imitating God?
No. No, there is a story I'm thinking about in the Hindu tradition where this question comes up, and but they would use the word guru. They would have a guru, and the guru would do all kinds of things that were forbidden by the religion, right? And so, including having sex, and so this guy was accompanying the guru, and the guru would have sex with this young woman, but he forbade the disciple from doing that. And then the guru would like swallow hot coals. So he said, if you want to follow me, you have to do. If you want to imitate me, you have to do what the good and the bad. So one of the bad things that he did was I'm really botching the story because I'm driving, but the guru could swallow hot coals, and the disciple was not ready to swallow hot coals. So there's things that the divine can do that a human shouldn't do, or even attempt.
And have you had gurus? Go ahead, Elliot.
And well, as David says, you're basically meant to follow the rules, and that's about it.
And have you had a guru, Elliot?
A personal guru? No.
Have you had people that you wanted to emulate? Have you had mentors?
Absolutely.
Have you had people who've groomed you?
I've not been groomed. I've had mentors, not in that sort of formal capacity, like I think you're intending the question, but I've had what I would consider to be mentors. Yeah.
And how about you, David? Have you had mentors? Have you had people that you wanted to imitate and follow?
Yeah, sure. I mean, from secular like training, that not like a guru, but like an individual trainer or coach for something like chess, math teacher, instructors, and then when I went to Israel, I had rabbis. I didn't. Rebbes, and then within Hinduism, I've had gurus. None that I've ever given unequivocal fellowship to, which within the larger movement you might be recommended. That I always had multiple rabbis that I studied under. I never had one rabbi that I asked all my questions to and did what they said. Nor did I really ever have a situation where I would have had one person I would have asked advice for and then just did what they said. I always, got advice from multiple people. But yeah, I mean, since COVID-19, even here in Metro Detroit, I consult rabbis all the time.
Elliot, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I did. I had a point. I think a mentor or guru type figure is somebody that you wouldn't want to disappoint. It's not somebody that simply teaches you things, but there's a moral dimension to it. And, similar to a parent, that you would sort of conduct yourself at a standard much higher because you wouldn't want your mentor to know that you've fallen below that standard. So there's a certain, that's what I take to mean when you talk about a mentor or a guru. There's a moral character dimension.
And Elliot, I'd have to think that you would be kind of scared of having that close of a relationship with a guru, because it would make demands on you. It would impinge on your personal freedom.
Absolutely. It absolutely would.
I could add in what we were talking about in the Ronnie Goldman book, like The Hero, that, like the rabbi or the guru, they're much higher ranking. And if you feel like, okay, like, Luke, you're doing for the Jews, you're producing results for Team Judaism or, a group within Judaism, and you feel like you're kind of reporting back to somebody who's much higher ranked and doing much more than we're doing. And so you like, whatever I'm doing, I feel like I'm doing, like I'm winning, I'm accomplishing for the Jews, and then that's under a figurehead that is much more advanced and accomplishing much more, is much more respected in the larger Jewish circles. And if someone asks me, especially in Judaism, like I'm under the auspices, like, what are you doing? And say, well, like, no, I'm working together under this respected figure, and that would be, in secular terms, but especially within Judaism or Hinduism, where if you're doing something for the team, and then you pass the authority on to a more recognized, greater figure, that you're doing it under his umbrella.
Elliot, did you want to add something?
No, but well, not yet. Let me.
This is a safe space, Elliot.
I know, but I'm parking, Luke. I can, like, I'm a total. All right. I'm out of the car again. I'm at the flea market, Luke. Aren't you excited?
Maybe, Luke, you felt that way about Dennis Prager. I don't know if you felt that way, like, about a rabbi, where you were doing something under the auspices or umbrella of a larger rabbi, but maybe you felt that way about, like, Dennis Prager, that you're kind of, just doing a lower level of what he's doing. And if someone asked you, you're like, I'm emulating Dennis Prager, and something like that, and like you're winning for the larger group and team in the way that this person, broad shoulders you could fall under.
Yeah, there was probably some of that, but I always liked my own freedom too much, so I could never really be a follower of anyone. So I have met many charismatic rabbis who part of me wanted to follow, or I'd start following them, but then I'd quickly realize that there'd be tremendous demands on me that come with associating with a particular rabbi. And so those restrictions on my freedom would destroy my desire to become a follower. So
you never produced wins for the community in a way that the rabbi, if you mentioned that, the rabbi would be, oh yeah, Luke, like he's producing these results and it's good for, us in the congregation.
Yeah, I mean, that's happened. Yeah. So I've been part of a Torah class, a daily Torah class, a Daf Yomi class, and the rabbi would mention the participants, including myself, or there'd be the various volunteer capacities that I've engaged in where the rabbi would mention me from the bima. Elliot, you were going to say something.
Well, yeah, there's something very like a real, like, tradition. It's very anti-democratic, right? There's a real clear notion about hierarchy.
Yeah.
And, certain people are higher than others, right? And if you want to truly be authentic, you have to up your game. You have to embody like a much more rigorous code of conduct, and very few people are capable of doing that. So it's a long process. And what happens in the West, especially in democratic institutions, they like to tear down the notion of this of a guru, of someone being bigger, better than you, right? Everyone's equal, bro. That's a very modern notion, and it's actually really destructive.
Yeah, I don't know if like I mentioned, like a lot of rabbis are very practical, and if you produce results, they're going to be happy for you to produce the results under their auspices if it benefits them and their movement and then their congregation. And especially while you're winning and producing results, they're much more likely to make exceptions and not demand all the rules. So if you're not producing results, there's going to be much higher demands that you fall in line and you have all the commands and rules. But if you're producing results and winning for the community, the rabbis might even fight over you, so that that you would be producing the results for them, and they would make exceptions for your your misgivings and your failings. You experience that, Luke?
Sure. Rabbis tend to be pragmatic. I mean, generally speaking, rabbis want every person they can to be a member of their synagogue, to attend their Torah class, to participate in volunteer activities, to give money, to give time. I mean, rabbis tend to be quite pragmatic. What about, Elliot, did you want to jump in there? Nope.
Well, can I hit you on that, Luke? Like that winning for the community, you never felt like you were winning for the Jews, or like bringing in victories and advancing the cause of the Jewish people in a way that the rabbi would have backed you. Like, yeah, Luke's winning for the Jews; he's winning for our community.
Yeah, I mentioned that. So when I'm, say, a regular participant in Daf Yomi, that gets publicly acknowledged. When I'm a regular participant in Torah learning with the rabbi, that often gets publicly acknowledged. When I'm volunteering in various capacities for the synagogue, that gets publicly acknowledged. When I join a synagogue, that gets publicly acknowledged. When I'm
outside of the synagogue, not even saying that, okay, if you're helping the synagogue, they acknowledge it, but it's saying what you're doing outside of the synagogue, you're winning for the community in the larger community, and as opposed to actively doing something to benefit within the community, that you're bringing in wins for the Jewish people.
I don't recall a lot of examples of that. I mean, I've had various rabbis say they appreciate my blog, or they appreciate a video that I've made, or that they think it's a good approach and it's good for the Jews to tackle a particularly difficult subject that other people would be afraid to tackle. So I've
Did you bring non-Jews or secular Jews to synagogue? I mean, I feel that most in terms of, like Kirov or something, like results, like, saying like, I read your books, you spoke to a lot of powerful people. And then, if you could bring them to a synagogue or a Jewish event, saying you're expanding the circles, you get out there and you made contact to a person that was outside of the community. And now, they have a warmer relationship to the community, and we could credit directly Luke Ford for that.
Yeah, there's been some of that, but there's also been at times a look of apprehension when say, a friend visits the synagogue and meets the rabbi, and the rabbi says, what brings you here? And it's like, oh, my friend Luke Ford told me about it.
I mean, you could lose for the community too, God forbid, but I'm saying, like, you've brought in wins for the community. You've done that before.
Yeah, but also it's not like my name is an unalloyed joy for every rabbi in town. But David, what about the impingement on your freedom? So when you become a follower to a particular rabbi, there are then demands on you that if you're going to maintain that close relationship, you'll have to live up to. So how have you dealt with that?
Well, I mean, for long periods of time, I did it. I did, like I showed up to Minyan every day. I prayed. I kept all the commandments and, the fullest to the best of my ability. I consulted the rabbis. But I was also kind of an outsider, so there was always, especially when I was among, Hasidim and Haredim, it was kind of known that I'm an outsider. So it was more accepted that I would be likely to have shortcomings. And then in New York, maybe I got involved in stuff where, because I was an outsider, like I said, I was doing things within the outside community where I was doing things for the rabbis that were beneficial for the community, and therefore, like, it was known that it was okay if my standards was a little bit more lax, and would have been directly maybe like contingent upon, like, once you stop producing wins for the community, that lax standard, then you're just a bum, so it's contingent upon the wins. And I did things like building permits or community liaison where there'd be a tangible results. I drove the Erev truck, where we literally expanded the territory of the community, like literally with the Erev, where we were there with the truck, in the most visible way possible, expanding the territory of the community. And in that sense, like, it's contingent upon winning. And as soon as the wins aren't there, then you're just a bum.
And Elliot, do you often feel like an outsider?
A little bit. I would say. Often, I don't feel like I'm thoroughly estranged, but okay, well, yesterday, so here's an example. So sort of the birthday party for work, the CEO and her daughter's birthday. And so there was this big party down there, and I was dreading it the whole day because I hate those types of things. Like these sort of formal social occasions, where you sort of meet and greet and you exchange small talk, these types of things. These scenarios tend to make me very uncomfortable. So in that sense of the word, yeah, in those situations, I definitely feel like an outsider. So is that what you're getting at, or something else?
When you're at Charlottesville, did you feel like an outsider?
Well, we had a permit, Luke. We had a permit.
And then the police said that you couldn't speak.
Yeah, and then we were all funneled into this park.
Yeah.
And
the Antifa were beating you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if I like the question, Luke.
What about in America? Do you feel like an outsider to America?
No. I've been thinking about that. I really like America. And I have no desire to travel, and I have no desire to live outside the country. And for all its faults, I kind of like the insanity that America sort of brings to the table. I went to France 2008 on a ski trip, and I was in France for a week, and the people were just kind of mean and dour, and I just didn't like the people in France, right? There just seemed to be this bitchiness that sort of accompanied their entire culture and their way of interacting. And as soon as I got off the plane in America, I felt relaxed. I felt like, oh yes, this is the cast that I know, and everybody's kind of warm and giggly, and it's just, I don't know. It was at that moment that I really did feel like an American.
So you love the big gay disco that America's become.
Love is love, Luke.
Love is love. David, do you feel like an outsider in America?
Not really. I mean, I feel pretty American, and even criticizing the government or being critical of America feels relatively American. Like in terms of personal freedom, I know the laws. I know, I know generally how most civic processes work. I know a lot of my elected officials or local police officers, and so being in line with the legal system or the civics of America versus being popular or having friends might be different things. So the general culture of America, I feel alienated from, but the governmental system of checks and balances and in the law, I feel pretty comfortable with.
But I mean, you look different than most Americans, so you don't then feel like an outsider because you're dressed differently. You have a beard and you're wearing a yarmulke.
Well, I feel that in a certain sense, but I don't connect that to Americanism. I connect that to groups or cliques or social culture, because I think I have a pretty good understanding for the larger rules that society function by. So I feel like in line with those. So whether you don't have to be liked by your peers to be in line with the law in America, in a lot of sense that the American dream doesn't necessarily include popularity. It includes an individualism where I fulfill some sort of function, make my money, have a job, and then I could have a house and build up a family. And so I don't connect that to whether people like me or whether I look weird to people to Americanism. Generally I think the Americanism is two things. It's their right to look at me that way, and it's my right to be that way. That they can't really discriminate. They could not like me. They could tease me. They could not want to be my friend. But they still have to do business with me, and there's a legal system that protects my right, and there's individual freedoms that we're both going to go home to our private property at night. So that's my understanding of America. So I don't consider the unpopularity or people thinking I'm weird look in an un-American way that's central what it means to be American.
And how often do you leave Detroit area and leave Michigan, dude?
Almost never. Like God forbid, only a few times in like the last 10 years related to God forbid, the death of my grandparents.
Right. And Elliot, what does driving mean to you as an American? You'll need to unmute.
I mentioned, like, I went down last weekend to Missouri for a family event, and I felt really comfortable dressed as an Orthodox Jew basically everywhere. Like, I could see, like, people wouldn't want me moving into the neighborhood, but people were pretty nice. No one said anything, the gas station or the hotel, like, it's America. I could dress however weird I want. And, at the end of the day, like, I pull up my wallet and make a financial transaction. And so, there's a feel like, oh, who is this guy? Or even maybe we don't want him around. But there's also like, okay, like, we'll do business with him, and then he's going to go and be on his way. It's not a problem. And I felt that way, really probably everywhere in America. I don't think there's anywhere in America I wouldn't feel like that.
And what about driving? How important is driving to your American identity?
Yeah, I'm a car person. Like, even New York, most of the time I had a car. I worked as a driver. I'm from Metro Detroit, the home of the automobile. So, definitely a car person. My parents' neighborhood doesn't even have sidewalks. Like, it's meant for cars, not people. And my neighborhood here, as I said, like, our neighborhood motto is "We snitch." If you see someone on the streets that you don't recognize, call the cops just to be safe. In the extent it's meant for cars, not people. And if you live in the neighborhood, maybe you'd be on the sidewalk or something, or kids playing. But I'm not sure if LA is like that. It's designed for cars and not people. Where you're going, get where you're going, and you get into your car and you get where you're going. Then you go. And if you're hanging out on the street already, like, at least in a residential neighborhood, it's suspicious. Like, if you don't live there, what are you doing there? And you're in the big city. I mean, maybe you're Hollywood. I guess you're probably in a residential area also, where if people were walking right outside your house, you're probably like, who are you? What are you doing here? But, on the main streets, that might be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And what do you listen to in the radio? Do you listen to the radio? Or what do you do?
I listen almost exclusively Teaching Company. And I've listened to almost all of their courses. At this point, I probably listened to over 1,000 courses. I listen to them in 2-speed. So I'm listening right now to their new course on John F. Kennedy, 12-part lecture series. I just listened to one on practical geology. And, in the beginning, I listened to ones that were more interesting, because I've listened to almost all of them. I listen to basically all of them, the new ones, as they come out, no matter what the subject. And if I've listened to all of them before the new ones come back, I'll go back and listen to some older ones. Like, I just did one like martial arts or French. I didn't really study the French, but I listened to the course on French. I have one, loaded up for like Greek. I'm going to take a course on like learning Greek. I probably won't, actively try to learn it, but I'll listen to the course anyways.
Yeah, the chat says you can't understand America without driving at night on an interstate highway, listening to the radio, classic rock or talk radio, 70 miles per hour plus in the vastness of America, and the private, intimate nature of a car on the open road. So I'm going to wrap up the show for today. David, any final words?
Yeah, have an easy fast. I'm not sure. Was that book interesting enough? Did you want to try to pound through it, or
yeah, well, definitely. Yeah, I want to do more on Ronnie Goodman's book on conservative oppression.
Okay, great. So have an easy fast, and